good luck.
Yeah.
Let's
Now
see.
you got to ask everybody to tell everybody to move over here again.
Yeah, we got to give people time
Chance
to.
figure it out what happened.
Yep.
Hey,
Gold Panner.
We had to reboot.
I had to get back on. I think I lost the USB bus on the computer, which of course the camera was feeding through. Hey, Douglas.
Hey, Douglas.
So
Hi,
I need a drink. As you can hear, the goddess is alive and well.
Oh,
Well, not
Jeff.
well. Hey, Jeff. Okay, you made it.
All right.
See if Chris makes it.
Yeah. See if we can get everybody moved
Oh,
over.
good Lord. What a pain in the butt.
Hey, Terry.
Hi,
Lars.
hey, Gold Panner. Terry, Lars. Yep. The only one we're missing is Chris.
Hi,
He went on a beer run.
No, that was Lars.
Oh, that was Lars.
Lars was talking about the beer run.
Oh, all right.
Yep.
That
Oh,
was a fast beer run.
Mhm.
he said it only had to get to the fridge, so
Oh,
it wasn't too bad. Ah, there's Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, pretty much Chris. Actually, I think this might have been my computer. I think the USB bus died, and the camera goes through the bus. So I had to just plug it directly into the computer, and I'm not exactly sure. Oh, that's my cell phone charger that's still plugged in. Anyhow, so first of all, the most important news, Eva's feeling better. So that's a good thing. And Jim is
Here.
back with us. And I've got a mystery that we need to see if we can figure out. I don't think we can figure it out tonight, but I think I got a way to figure it out, but we'll discuss it a little bit.
You already have my point of view.
No elk yet. We need snow. It's not fair. It's too damn hard hunting in all that timber, dead timber and that, and being dry and noisy.
Do you have any
No, I
more
have not,
time
Jeff.
in
Yeah.
the hunting season?
Jeff, yeah, I've been watching the Dale brothers. That's a pretty cool deal they got going down there. Pretty neat Wednesday night show.
Elk hanging. Yeah, they're hanging around all over
Yeah,
the
there's
place.
elk up there somewhere.
Do you still have any time in the hunting season?
Oh yeah, we got 2 more full weekends, two more weeks, so we got time.
Anyhow, so let's see. Because of Eva's illness, didn't go out in the field this week. Spent most of my time at the ranch, at the mill. I processed 1,500 pounds of ore and 200 gallons of solution through the resin, and waiting for the analytical results on that to see how much we've got loaded in the resin and how it's still working. We should have plenty of extra resin on the extra cartridges, so I'm not worried about losing any gold yet. Weather forecast so far is still for 10 days. It's dipping down below freezing at night at times, but not bad.
No, it's been pretty mild here.
So I can still work the mill. I've been doing some crushing out there too to get more empty buckets to haul back to the mine. So this week's pretty much been focused hanging around town, letting Eva get better, taking care of this, that, and the other. Had one of the jaw plates on my RC46 brake.
Oh,
And so I'm going to try welding it back together. I've got 3, so it's not a critical issue. It's the replaceable wear plate on the movable jaw. So it's not a critical item anyhow in terms of it's not going to stop me. I prefer to put it back. I think they cost, somewhere in the neighborhood of like $60 each
I suppose.
because they're heat treated and stuff.
Right, hard.
So anyhow, so I got that, and see, she's doing much better. In terms of the leaching solution, Chris says hi, little one. The max loading on the leaching solution is just going to be what happens when you mix it at the proper blend with the ore. And my assumption is it's going to vary between 1/4 and 1 ounce to the ton in the leaching solution, depending upon what the grade of the ore is, with a 2-to-1 ratio. And we're not spending a whole lot of time splitting and assaying the head grade at this point, so it's kind of hard to tell. Previous solution was running about 1 ounce to the ton, both due to evaporative concentration and the fact that I was just rerunning it and not extracting the gold because I didn't have a resin set up yet. So it's probably going to be between 1/4 and 1 ounce to the ton. That again is determined primarily by the grade of your ore and the appropriate solution, solid to liquids ratio, which is about 2-to-1. Seems to work quite well. In terms of in the long run, say that seems to be what we're looking at. We're looking at between 1 ounce to the ton. Between about 1/2 ounce to the ton, or a little bit lower than that. Much lower than that, we're not going to bother hauling it home. But up to now, the highest we've gotten so far was 3 ounces per ton. However, we got some questions here too. About 6 pounds of Eco Goldex per ton of ore initial concentration at a pH of about 10.5, which I forget how much lime that is, all right, off the top of my head. I may have it written down, not sure. No, I don't have it written down here. I have a cheat sheet out at the mill. I would guess about 10 pounds per ton lime, but that's going to be much more dependent on the ore chemistry than the Eco Goldex per se. Smoking got some Ball brand lids, regular and wide, via Walmart website.
Good for you, Smoking.
And so I'm consuming about half those chemicals. In order to replenish the barren solution after extracting the gold, I'm needing to add about 1 cup of Eco Goldex, which I think is like 2 pounds, per 100 gallons of solution, and about 2 cups of lime. I've made the conversions a while back and made the cheat sheet so I can just scoop and dump instead of having to weigh everything. And so basically for every 500 pounds of ore, I'm using about 1 cup of Eco Goldex and 2 to 3 cups of lime to bring it back into optimum condition. So that's quite reasonable.
Yeah, definitely. That's very economical.
Yeah, that's not a problem. In terms of how much gold loading on the resin, do not know yet. We're running, that's got to ask samples at the lab right now. What I'm doing is running the pregnant solution in 100-gallon batches through the resin. It makes the numbers real easy, Right. And it takes between 1 and 2 hours to do that. And I'll just run it through. And then at the end, during the whole process, at the beginning, middle, and end, I took a head sample. So to kind of average things out. And at the end, I'm taking a sample after the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 resin extraction and send those off to the lab. I just took them to the lab this morning. And when I get the answers back, then I'll be able to take at least 3 Three.
Yeah, 3.
Well, there was the one that was running at the low feed rate, and then 3 at the higher feed rate.
3.
But anyhow, I'll have at least 300-gallon batches that I can then do a plot on, and I can calculate a pretty accurate loading factor of the resin itself. Okay. And at what point does the resin become so loaded that it doesn't really like to grab the gold out of solution sufficiently aggressively? These things we need to kind of figure out.
You'll be able to pick that up though from filter 1, resin 1 to resin 3, right?
Yeah. You'll see how this works
as you see their buildup.
Yeah, because I mean, like, see, here's that first set at 100 gallons per hour, and here's all our different assays. But that was our first 100 gallon. That was actually 170 gallons there. And then I got 2 100-gallon batches after, and I, get all those numbers, plot them out. And I am using the Type S, Douglas. I do not know how it works compared to the Type O, but I am using the Type S Eco Goldex. It does seem to work pretty darn well. Yeah, exactly, Chris. And I also took intermediate samples at 50 gallons just in case we need more resolution in the future, but they have not been run since I didn't see any need to it at this point. I got enough data points at this point. I think I should be able to see. I mean, if we're approaching or past optimum, we'll be able to see it pretty easily. If we're not approaching it yet, it's going to be like, holy crap, this stuff's getting a lot of gold in it.
Well, that's good.
Because right now, before the last 2 batches, we were loaded at the rate of about 23 grams per pound of resin. Okay. And that's not too bad. 3/4 of an ounce per ton. And an estimated, around 17 grams of gold actually loaded in resin at that point. At this point, well, let's see, what were our head grades back then? Resin 2, T1, B, T2, T3. The head was 28, huh? So 28 grams per 240. So we're looking at maybe another 24 grams loaded onto resin. Yeah. So yeah, we should be, up to about 1.5 ounces or more. Yeah, it's doing really good. So it's looking pretty good. Gruber Ned Jardine from Australia has been sending us some information on what he's finding on the ashing and elution of resins. And so far, there hasn't been a magic bullet recipe that shows up. We're going to try it. The big companies are trying to save every penny they can, and they deal in big volumes. So they typically will go with elution and regeneration of the resin and reuse. We, on the other hand, are looking for maximum simplicity. So we're hoping to have some kind of a flux formula that when added to the resin, you can just do a direct smelt without too much trouble. The problem with the ashing of the resin is it tends to vaporize the gold, which, as you can see, is probably undesirable. The one thing that kind of got me, one of the things that Ned sent this week, it's like, so you have your furnace, first you dry it, and then you're furnacing it, and then you have to treat the flue gas to recover the gold from the flue gas by putting it onto carbon. And it's like, well, now you still got to do something to the carbon.
You just start it over again.
And so, I say we'll be working this this winter to see if there isn't a flux formula that we could use that, as the gold starts to try and leave the resin, will grab it with sufficient aggression that we have minimal losses. For example, silver, potentially lead oxide plus silver, or silver chloride is kind of nice because if you have a lot of silver in your recovery, you can then reconvert it to silver chloride by dissolving in nitric acid and precipitating with salt. So silver chloride is one of the chemicals that you use in that process. You can then recover it later quite easily and turn it back into silver chloride, reuse it again. So the silver becomes, I don't know, more like a tool than a consumable.
Right.
So we don't know, but that is going to wait until the snow falls or until the solution freezes up at the mill there. That's correct, except the problem with it is the gold is already essentially in atomic form on the resin. So as you vaporize the resin, the little atoms of gold just go drifting off. They're not being vaporized from a solid form of gold, because there is no solid form of gold. It's distributed essentially at a molecular level, and you're just freeing those molecules up. And that's why we think we should be able to, just something that'll really grab it should work. Some kind of collector. We don't know. It may be something very simple. You can just, maybe just borax. Well, if you coat it with, cover it in borax with some kind of oxidizing flux underneath, it may work just fine. May not, but we can do it in small batches, really, at low risk.
You're not going to lose a lot of gold if you have a failure.
If we have half a gram of resin and it contains, actually, currently we're looking somewhere like almost 10 to 15, 1/10 to 1/15 gold. So if you're talking 10%, so if you had a half a gram of resin, you got 0.05 of a gram of gold in that, which is easy to measure. And so we can do these little teeny batches and tests and see what happens. We may wind up having essentially to fire assay it, where we mix it with a flux that contains a collector metal and an oxygen and stuff, and you heat it up, and the oxygen combines with the resin, and the collector grabs the gold. And, which essentially is what fire assay is. Again, that's a pretty standard technique, and then just cupel the lead or the silver. This is one of the nice things about using silver as the collector, is then you can take that silver and redissolve it, reprecipitate it, and use it in the next batch. That's correct, Courage. That's what apparently the one of the problems is. And so putting a activated carbon filter on your flue gas is kind of complication. You see, Chris already has some ideas, which we will check out once everything at trial by fire. I love that, Jeff. But
that's probably where
once we get the other stuff shut down on us, then we'll be focusing more on that. Maybe later this week, I'll go and be able to get back to the mine and try and get through that timbering. Yes, it also dissolves silver, Douglas. There's also other things I'm sure it's dissolving, like probably copper.
Copper, yeah.
We haven't done a full analysis on the solution to see what else is in it besides the gold, because every number you get is another $25. And it gets pretty, although I think they do the suite for like 85 or something locally here.
It'd be fine for 1 or 2 tests, but if you start getting carried away,
that burns up money in a really fast. So, that's why we're gonna quite a few. And that also may be a limiting factor on the resin.
Your loading, your resin loading would be affected by copper, especially.
It's entirely possible. And as the solution gets reused and you're grabbing the gold out of the solution, that doesn't mean things like the copper and iron aren't going to keep going up and up and up and up. So, these are the sort of things that can become an issue fairly quickly that didn't start out being an issue at all. We shall just have to see. But say once we get shut down for the winter, then that's when I'm going to be focusing more on the resin tests. Right now, and I hate doing it, sitting out there at the ranch for 4 hours, changing buckets on the impact mill sucks.
Yeah.
It's boring as hell.
Learn to
You're
sing to
the one that
yourself.
invented it. Ben.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
You created this baby.
It works though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot better than doing this.
Well, sitting on the excavator feeding the wash plant 12 hours a day isn't much different. It gets rather boring after a while.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, Jeff. It makes a big difference if you can recover it.
Yeah.
Now
the problem with using Eco Goldex to recover silver is that your economics is almost 2 orders of magnitude less. It's like about a 50th of what the value of gold is.
Yeah. That's
So your cost per ounce may stay the same, but how much you get per ounce drops dramatically.
true.
Hello, Stephen. If you have any questions, please ask. It helps drive the conversation. And let's say any questions you have, ask them. It really helps out, keeps things going well. We are working diligently to try and come up with a complete end-to-end system from the mine all the way to the gold, where we've kind of figured out most of the issues along the way. Obviously, there's things that are ore dependent that we can't necessarily evaluate and deal with for you.
No.
But in general, most of the processes are fairly interchangeable. And so, yeah, be happy to help out all we can here. The EGXS is running, well, let's see. We bought those 100-pound bags or 50-pound bags?
50-pound bags.
They're 50-pound bags. Got 2 of them, $300 for the product, $200 for freight. So that would be $3 per pound. 100 pounds, $300.
Yeah.
The price for Eco Goldex by the ton, I can get you that because I asked, and it was 3,000 something, I believe. Let me see here. And that was FOB Montreal. So let's see. This is, come on, computer. There we go, right there. 3,250 FOB Montreal. You have to arrange the freight. Okay. So that'd be what? A little bit better than $1.50 a pound.
Yep.
Yep. So a little better than $1.50 a pound by the ton, FOB Montreal. Okay. No, I have not, Chris. Don't know at this point. I don't know how long a quote would be worth either. But yeah, that's basically the price FOB Montreal per ton. which is quite reasonable, I would think. And don't know what the availability is in other places, like our gentleman here, Stephen from Tanzania. I have no idea what it would take to get it there.
Good grief.
And say it does seem to work pretty well and pretty simply with our ore. Always throw that in there. And he sells it in small quantities too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is out of Panda Land there. What's his name? Tricky Dicky in the Philippines is using a different blend from Panda Land. I do not know.
Robert, it's the same reason there's nothing else manufactured here.
My guess would be, first of all, it's a fairly small market.
Yeah.
In the United States. It's relatively new technology. This is something that's being developed, etc. For example, Clean Mining has stuff, but they're very tight-lipped.
Yeah, they are, because I got a hold of, when we first started talking about it, I got a hold of them too, and it's like, well, we want to look at your product. I mean, they literally will decide whether they even want to deal with you.
Yeah.
You know, that's how tight-lipped they are, and it's like, wow.
Yeah. I don't know about the patent on the Eco Goldex or whatever, but the Clean Mining people claim there's a patent involved there, but they're not stupid. They also know that if you have a patent on a formula, all you got to do is change the formula a little bit, and it's no longer covered by the patent, unless it's a basic patent, which this isn't, because these kind of chemical reactions have been known for decades. So that's why they're very tight-lipped, because they don't want to give away. And before they'll tell you anything or give you anything, you have to sign an agreement with them. So now they have a contractual agreement
right,
to grab you by the tender parts.
Yeah, it's a way of creating some revenue any way they can.
Well, it's also to give them control so that you can't duplicate, because if that's any kind of a decent agreement from their standpoint, it's going to be, you cannot duplicate it. You cannot simulate it. You cannot use something based on it. You cannot sell
I think part of their angle was to get into your mining operation and get a percentage of your mining operation, not so much the selling you a chemical or a product.
That's possible too. But again,
I really think they look at recovery and go, okay, well, we want just this little piece over here.
That could be, but they can't keep ownership of that if they can't keep you from going around them.
Oh, exactly.
So that's what the contract's all about. You won't know enough to screw us until you've agreed not to screw us.
Exactly.
You know, and that's good business.
Yeah. Well, no, well, it's a good business angle. It's just, you know, it makes it tough to do what Keith is trying to do or whatever, where you're trying to just do it on a small scale and try to find out, does this work? Is this going to work? Can we build a system that'll make it work?
Yep. No, we didn't do any agreement with Clean Mining, and Eco Goldex has not asked for any confidentiality agreements or anything like that.
Hello, Tricky.
Yep. Hey, Tricky, did you get your testing done with the lead oxide? Because that'd be interesting to see how that turned out.
Yes. Sooner or later, right?
Yeah. Well, he said he was going to get on it. You know, so that it's nice to have a bunch of people, a bunch of different places doing a bunch of different things. I understand, Chris.
I agree, Chris, until you kind of know what you're dealing with. Did the test for recovering the
It was fluffy and okay, yeah, the regular borax, not anhydrous, is less dense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your recovery, Tricky?
Did it work?
Yeah.
Did the silver retain the gold?
Say
help to collect it.
Were you able to get a good pour? Was the flux thick and viscous and not able to separate things or got any kind of results? And Chris, can you take regular borax and heat it and turn it into anhydrous borax? Just out of curiosity.
Good
Yeah.
question.
Because regular borax is about half
it's
water.
Flakes. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say, but the regular borax it's kind of fluffy and stuff. That's for sure. Anyhow, so that's it. I've also got a conundrum and a question and stuff. Dehydrate it in a hot oven. Okay. Now I have in my hot little hand here a mystery substance. Okay, let's see. So second test, I smashed some clear glass bottles. Used them with the rest of the borax on top. And poured it into a cone mold. Oh my God! The tension is killing me. And what was the result?
And then what happened?
What did you get, Tricky?
It's like a soap opera.
A few more months, Stephen. Yeah, not much. We're basically down to the last step, which is taking the resin to the gold. And there's a number of different ways that are used commercially to do that. And we think we can figure out something fairly simple and straightforward fairly quickly. Yeah, there is a difference. White beach sand is usually silica, whereas glass is a blend of a few things. Man, he just repeated it.
No, that was his second test. He changed it up a little bit.
Okay.
Thinner than borax. It
He's
seemed to help
teasing
stop the
y'all now.
volatilization of the gold.
Huh, says it did okay. Sweet. All right, Tricky. Now, here's a fun one. I have this stuff that I'm getting now. Now, in the impact mill, if you get a chunk of steel in there, or a chunk of hard facing, or a chunk of anything like that, even bullets, it'll tear them up, but you'll hear them because a chunk of rock, when it gets hit by that impactor, it goes pow, and then the sound rapidly diminishes. But if you get something that doesn't disintegrate, it goes
right. It keeps flying around in there.
And so I can tell when these things happen because you can just hear it in there. And what I have in my hot little hand, I don't know how well I can show this. That's not too bad.
Too bad, yeah.
That's not too bad. Now these are magnetic, and one would think, especially when you have a piece more like this, nice and round, that maybe they're just chunks of steel. However, if you take a look, say, at this one, you can see it's got a much more complex shape. It's bigger at the ends, and it's smaller, and there's no shiny surfaces to speak of. Now, if you were to take a piece of, say, rusty nail and throw it in there, one would expect it to be metallic. Now, there's a piece right here. This is the one that was smashed on an anvil. And you can see that that's malleable. It flattened. I heard you, Chris. I'm getting a plate right now. I would call that gray. Would you call that gray?
Yeah.
Okay. I would call that a gray streak.
Silver streak.
And it's, I don't know how cobalt would show.
I don't either.
Hi,
Not
Thalia.
like that.
Eva's doing much better, Thalia. But
It looks like it's got little speckles of garnet or something in it as well. So it's not just a tramp iron. It could be some kind of an iron oxide or an iron ore basically, but it's quite interesting looking at it. And there's some kind of a slight bit of metal to it as well.
Yep.
So
Thank you, sir, with the Arabic name that I can't read because it's in Arabic. But thank you for the compliment. We appreciate it. And, well, I presume that's Arabic, actually. It could be probably all kinds of other things, too. It could be, Taiwanese or Thailand.
well, that's what I said, Jeff. It almost looks like it could be nickel in with it, which would make it probably like iron ore steel with nickel. Because it's hard as hell, though. It is malleable, but it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not getting chewed up going through that grinder.
Not that
So
much, no.
it's almost like, chunks of iron ore that would be high in nickel
almost
or high
like
enough.
chunks of steel. Absolutely. So I was wondering, first of all, does anyone know any natural minerals that could be as tough as steel? And Farsi, yeah, it could be.
Is moly by itself isn't that magnetic though?
The moly's usually also pretty soft.
Right.
Yeah. This is quite magnetic.
I'm still in favor of my explanation.
Which is?
A meteor.
Yeah. It's a meteor. It's only little pieces of the dump, but it's a meteor.
Oh, yeah, it hit something.
Yeah, no, it does have the appearance of iron nickel, I think.
I can't tell. What I'm going to do is take and put a magnet on the inlet of the mill. So as stuff is feeding, as one of these chunks, whatever comes by, it can theoretically get pulled up into the magnet.
And look at it before it gets
Glad to see you, Khalid.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks
Welcome.
for being here. Yep.
What country do you come from or are working in, if we may ask? Yeah, that's a possibility, Jeff. But what I want to do is I want to get some that haven't been through the mill yet and see.
Yep.
Yeah, but this stuff is not silvery. That's the funny thing. It looks potentially rusted, but it's not a soft rust. I mean, it's a tough material that looks kind of like rust. It is quite magnetic. It is quite hard. I mean, the boss was smashing it against an anvil and it put a little dent in the anvil.
I'm telling you, it looks like a dang meteor.
Yeah, well,
it's too hard, I think.
There's a dozen of them right there.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's good enough for an analysis.
We could have that analysis, but I'm going to try and find
idea with the magnet to get a raw piece. Might be the better analysis,
because that'll tell you more than the just a chemical analysis will. If you can get a crystalline form and a few other things like that. Hello, Kim. How's it going?
Hello, Kim.
If it did turn out to be a meteor, I was so
It's not a meteor.
Yeah. It's not. It's 16 meteors in 3 feet. Good luck on that one. Yeah,
Patrick. Anvil abuse.
Yeah, exactly. Define SG test, Chris. Specific gravity. Heavy. I'll say it. If it was in any kind of a normal looking shape, I would say steel. Not a problem. But I don't have shiny surfaces on it, which in that mill I would expect to get some shiny surfaces quick.
I would have nicked it enough to make it.
And I don't see any fabricated shape residuals. Like if it was a nut, you'd expect to see a corner or an edge or something like that. And I'm not getting that. Yeah, it's definitely not pyrite. This is vastly tougher than pyrite. It is some seriously tough stuff. It is as tough as steel. And I'm just not aware of any minerals for sure that are, although I have no reason to believe there aren't any. We will figure it out, but it is an interesting observation, and it's from the dump material, so it could very easily be a steel contamination. One thing that I was wondering if it might be like chunks of drill bits or something as they were drilling the rock, and a piece of drill bit gets whacked off or something like that. I don't know.
They did at one time, hand weld some of them bits and sharpen them to keep using them again and again. But,
Y'all just watch.
well, Smoking, that's why he should watch this channel more often. Yep. Laying on the floor surrounded by pyrite. If they're nice big cubes, then you can sell them as specimens.
Right. You got to get it good enough for specimen stuff, though.
Yep. But anyhow, I say that's just something I thought I'd bring up as an interesting curiosity that we're going to be working on as a sideline. Again, there's not a lot of urgency on that, but it's piqued my curiosity, and we should figure it out. I don't think.
Yeah, Jeff, we could take it up here to the lab at Butte and have them test it also. So they can do the exact same thing, the fluorescence.
I agree, Stephen.
Not to be right, y'all would owe me apologies till the end of time.
Negative or positive? Well, it's magnetic, so I think that probably tells you it's pretty high iron. Yeah. And Stephen, yes, I agree. The mercury is not only toxic and a residual toxin in the soil. In that case, it's even worse than the cyanide, because cyanide at least breaks down. But it's also not as efficient on the real fine gold. Okay, Kim. My father, I think he had relatives in Salt Lake City. I think they were Bowens. My mother, I think her family's all from Ohio, the Shanks and the Spittlers. And my stepfather, he had a mother that lived in Missoula, and I had an uncle, Uncle Wayne and Aunt Mary Ricks from Bozeman. Now, Wayne was a heck of a fisherman. He was a super fly fisherman, I forget what Grandma's name was, but yeah, she lived in Missoula. I remember splitting some wood one time over at her house. It was in the city. That woman had a wood-fired stove and baked bread every day.
Yeah.
At least every day that we were there. Yeah. There was a fresh loaf for dinner. And I say, so that's kind of where my family is that I know of. I say the Bowens, I think, were mainly in the Salt Lake City area, but I'm not sure. Somewhere I have a book on the family that I've misplaced in all my moves and such.
Walsall there is over the other side of Bozeman.
Yeah. And so that's what I know about that. I say, we'll figure this out and I'll let you know, but I thought I'd bring that up. And so what have you been doing there, Jimmy?
Well, I went up, and for you guys, I did shoot another video. We went and opened a road into a mining claim area, private patent actually. Spent a good day just opening the road, and then the next day we brought an excavator in to do some test holes, just to identify if there was gold there. It had been slightly worked back from what we could find out in notes in about late 1870s. They had tried to dig at the drainage a little bit. So I was able to dig 3 good test holes in there just to run down to the, as deep as we could reach with a smaller excavator, and verify that we did have gold, and we did in all 3 holes. So now it's going to be going to next spring and coming up with a bigger testing program, some bulk testing where we can do 10-yard runs or something and figure out the economics if the drainage is worth mining, because it is about 1.5 miles of drainage that we've got access to on this claim. So it looks very, very positive for a pretty good operation in the future.
About how many tons or yards would you anticipate in something of that size, roughly, if it was good?
That's going to be hard to calculate, but I would say that we'd have, if we were only going to run maybe 150, 200 yards a day, we'd have probably 4 or 5 years worth of work there. Okay. So, you want to scale it to a point where maybe you're running, 80 yards an hour, or 800 to 1,000 yards a day, and get in and out of there in a 3-year period or a 2-year period of time. Move through economically a little better. But until we get in and do a testing program, we did the test holes about 300 feet apart up one side of the drainage because we had a pretty good bench, and it should have been the lean bench. But it was like, let's see if we've got gold. I mean, the first question is there gold? So we did that, and I did shoot some video that Keith and I will try to edit and get out maybe this week yet if we get time.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem.
It's going to be short, but it'll give you an idea of what we did this past week. We were lucky to have this kind of weather this late in the year to do it. And we'll, kind of build from there as to what we're going to do in the spring for a full-out testing program. Because at that point, we'll be doing both sides of the drainage and maybe a few potholes throughout the middle of the drainage, and then trying to identify what controls we've got.
So we may get a...
Yeah, Mohammed, that 300 feet was kind of in an area. We looked at the bench, and I kind of walked it and then looked at it, and I decided that I'm going to go about give or take 300 feet. I mean, we didn't measure it off exactly or anything. I just decided where there was 3 decent access points where we didn't hurt really any vegetation. We dug straight down, basically a short trench, straight down as deep as we could, to a depth of about 13 feet, 12 or 13 feet on the holes, and watched the characteristics. I made notes of the characteristics of the overburden and where we hit gravels and the clay, and which you'll see on the video, and I'll explain it on the video as well. And we got into some bigger cobble and bigger gravels at that depth, and we never did hit bedrock. So the first thing in the spring is going to be dig as deep as we can on both sides of the drainage to see what kind of depth we're even talking about. We're guessing we were probably within 3 or 4 feet of bedrock from the old notes that we did run across on that area. But until we dig it, you don't know. And then by doing multiple test holes up the drainage at distances of, let's just say, 100 feet apart, you'll start to see if there's variations in bedrock to where you may have some good traps, like in a sluice box at the bottom of that drainage. So a really good testing program is what it's going to take to identify, before we spend a lot of money mobilizing equipment in there, is get enough test holes in there in the small trommel where we can just wash back into the holes and see what the economics are and what kind of problems we may have. And we can delineate some of that bedrock contour at that point with just test holes. So, then we could identify possibly some really good areas if we've got some tip over in bedrock as we go up the drainage. And we may even go as far as doing some electronics in there to see if we can read a bedrock depth. We haven't decided on what the program's actually going to be.
That was just a rock.
So the streak was silvery, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
it's
gray.
Yeah, I call it gray. This one on the edge
it's
there,
not going to show up.
Yeah,
where
we
the
got
dam with that. Yeah, lighting.
There we go. We can get it kind of like that. But the color on the camera is not true color either for some reason. In terms of Mohs hardness, at least 6. And when I said magnetic, I mean magnetic.
It all jumped to the top.
Yep.
Very magnetic.
There's a couple in there that are not. Isn't that interesting? I wonder what those are.
I'll try, slide that apart and see what happens.
Let's see what these are.
Yeah, Mohammed, I mean, in a tight area, you want to tighten up your testing pattern, but our main goal in doing what we did this week was we had time, we mobilized, loaded up a small excavator, ran in there and dug 3 holes to verify that we actually had gold at that point in the drainage. Because that, as long as we know now that it's worth further testing, that answered the question is, first of all, is there gold there that's even worth going after? And the answer at this point is yes. So we'll make a bigger testing program out of it going into next year and possibly even be mining by next year. But we'll definitely probably spend, 3 weeks to a month just doing test holes and spend that money. It's better to lose, $20,000 than to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to run gravels that don't have gold.
And with respect to a few of the things here, people are still speculating. Grind one and see what the sparks look like. That's definitely a possibility.
That's an interesting idea.
Where did I put those damn magnets?
Right there.
That's where they're hiding.
They're in the dark over there.
Yeah. Lead? No.
No, it's not.
It's way too hard for lead.
Yeah. Nickel maybe, but
Yeah, it is as hard as steel. Not even close to as soft as lead. Yep. Meteorite.
thanks for the
Possible but unlikely. Yeah.
thanks for the feedback, Tricky, because it does all helps as Keith's going through what he's doing.
Look up that mineral I linked. I don't know. Where's the link?
I don't know. Right
There we
Mineral
go.
Web. Yep.
Let's see. What do we got here? Magnetoplumbite. Oh, that's obviously got some lead in it.
Aluminum, iron, lead, and
Magnetoplumbite?
oxygen. Associated with metamorphic iron. Yeah. That's possible, Chris.
I don't know. What's the Mohs on it?
Where the hell?
Mohs 6? I don't know. I think that's its density 5, hardness 6, orthoclase, strongly magnetic, streak dark brown. I wouldn't call that dark brown.
No, it's more silver,
Yeah.
nickel looking.
Yep.
That's
And grayish
interesting.
black to black. No, this stuff is more like a rust brown. Yep. No, that's got possibility. It's fairly close, but I don't think you got it.
Good job, Chris.
Yep.
That was quick. Obtanium.
Hello, Mr. Fang.
Obtanium.
But anyhow, I say we'll figure it out because it is so. Say first of all, with the magnets, it'll be so easy to collect more in its original form. Although it may have gotten damaged by the jaw crusher, but that's got a 1/4 inch gap. So I think most of these would go right through it.
Yeah, they would drop through if that's all the size they were.
Yeah. So I'm not terribly worried about figuring it out. We will figure it out. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting little something that showed up. So how's the general area around this placer you're looking at? Does it look like there's any lode mines?
Oh yeah,
there?
there's a lot of lode mines, and there was some that were pretty good gold. There was a cyanide plant actually right in the drainage there that there's some remains of it.
Mhm.
And there was a large mill above us that operated a big stamp mill, 3-story stamp mill that operated during the late 1870s, 1880s until 1891 when the economy collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
So the outlook on the whole thing was great. But until you go in there and dig holes to find out, did they get it all, or was it even plastered? And we think there's some areas in there that they never even plastered. They're fairly flat and wet, so they skipped. They honey holed it as they went up the drainage.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, we got almost 2 miles of drainage, a good 1.5 miles of drainage that we can mine. So it's going to be fun. It could be a really fun project.
Sounds like it. One you can video from start to finish.
Right, over a course of some time.
Could it be a chunk of hard facing that broke off? I have seen chunks of hard facing. They behave in a somewhat similar manner. However, they do not look like these. They are magnetic, but they're rounded because it was a fluid at one time, and they're extremely hard, and they're gray. This isn't gray. This is brown. Taconite, don't know. Not familiar with taconite. Is it as hard as steel? If you take a piece of taconite, put it
it's a high iron
on an anvil and smack it with a hammer, will it shatter or will it dent the cheap anvil?
That was my question, Jeff. Exactly. It's like you're bordering on iron ore or something here.
Stephen, to get the magnetics away from the microfine gold is not that difficult, although you have to do it a couple of times to keep from losing gold, sucked into the
losses
stuff. But you can do that by just doing it multiple times, and also stir the material up. So instead of trying to pick it up off the bottom of the pan, you're literally
floating it,
the iron directly out of the water. As the water kind of goes by with all these particles, it sucks those iron particles up against the magnet while letting the gold flow past. So try that as a way to do that. If you can get a good concentrate, and then you're just trying to get the gold away from the iron and stuff, that's where a little bit of Eco Gold X might come in handy, but then you're still going to have to get it out of solution and into something else. I've had pretty good luck getting the magnetics away from the microfine gold by slurrying it and then picking it out of the moving slurry with the magnet. There's a guy on here, Coulter, from Mining Magnets. He makes a wet magnetic separator that worked quite well, and it was a microfine gold concentrate from a hard rock ore. The primary magnetics in it was tramp iron from the mill.
Gold panner, it's a wet drainage. It does have an active creek in it. But on the patent, and when this was patented as a placer, we have the rights to move the creek or divert it anywhere we want. We'll still have to get a permit to do that, but it's all doable. It is private land. We have the water rights to, mining water rights. So far, everything is looking good. As far as Kodak, it isn't mine tailings that we're looking at for placer. It's a placer that had hard rock mines along the rim of the canyon above the placer. So the gold is oriented from the, cross veining across the drainage or whatever. That's where, the source of the gold. It is placer. We're not trying to mine tailings in this case.
See how that looks. We're looking up some taconite here. That really doesn't look like it there. I also don't think taconite is malleable. This is clearly malleable in that iron minerals interlayered with coarse chert or carbonate. No, that would not be malleable. No, it'd be hard, but it's not malleable. And this is malleable. You can, it's hard, but you can get it to smash flatter, but you will ding the surface of the anvil when you do it. Yep. I say it's giving all the indications in terms of its characteristics of being steel, but it doesn't look like steel. So we'll figure it out. Yeah, the FE304, I don't believe it's malleable or as hard as steel. I mean, literally, this is, well, you saw that chunk there? Okay. That's at least as tough as a nail, because he was whacking on it with a chunk of steel, and a nail wouldn't leave a scratch in an anvil, I wouldn't think. Although that could be contaminants from the surface too. If that's a mineral.
That's a good question. There really shouldn't have been any, if they leached it correctly with the cyanide and that, there shouldn't be any gold left in it. If they did their job right, the tailings should really not have had much gold left in them.
And the gold they would have left in them would generally be the coarser stuff.
Yeah, and yeah, that would be a true statement, is if it didn't leach with the cyanide, it would be fairly coarse gold that didn't get eaten up by the cyanide. So yeah, I guess that is a possibility. But in this case, most of the tailings at the upper end of the drainage were actually cleaned up in an environmental cleanup. So what little may have escaped downstream is probably going to be in our overburden that we're stripping off, because in this case, what we found is about 3 feet of volcanic clay above the gravels in the drainage. So we're going to have 3 to 5 feet of stripping before we even get to gravels that we want to deal with.
Jeff, in terms of, could it be bullets? In terms of, yeah, this is how you would find bullets, but it's not lead. Guaranteed it's not lead. There's also no copper jacketing as if it was like steel core bullets. I have actually dealt with exactly that material before from a dump that's been used for target practice. It's pretty definitive. You got lots of lead shavings.
No, it's not steel shot, Chris. It's actually has a kind of an interesting matrix to it. It's not.
Yeah, it's not round.
It's not shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's perplexing. I've seen a lot of stuff in dumps. Lots of bullets. You're going to see copper jacket is a very common thing. If you hit a cartridge case, a brass cartridge case, and it gets into the mill without you noticing it, it makes a really loud noise, and you wind up with a bunch of what look like nice, pretty little gold nuggets and stuff. They're raggedy, and really it makes what looks like little small nuggets and such, but it dissolves real easily in nitric acid. That happened once. I don't know. Do you remember that video? What's that about? Was it last spring? Not last spring, but like a year and a half ago?
You had some copper jacket stuff. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because we got a cartridge case in the mill. You could hear like, I mean, again, it makes just a horrendous noise, but it tore it up. This stuff is not getting torn up. It's going around in a single piece, going bangity, 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 bangity. It's tough. And let's see. Stephen, the best gold to leach is the smallest gold. Things dissolve faster when they're in smaller particle sizes. Think of rock salt versus granulated salt. The granulated salt will dissolve faster. So at the range where you lose the ability to really recover it well with gravity techniques, we're using the density to recover it. That's when it really starts dissolving fairly rapidly. And in our case, this particular Montana B, the gold is extraordinarily fine. It's 2000 mesh, 6.8 microns, however you want to say it. powdered sugar makes this stuff look, this stuff makes powdered sugar look coarse.
Right.
It is that fine.
Yeah.
It is really, really fine stuff. So the smaller it is, the better it leaches.
Fine and finer.
Yeah. So that's the nice thing. If it's too coarse for leaching, you should be able to gravity separate it. If it's too fine for gravity separation, you should be able to leach it pretty well.
Yep.
Yeah, I know, Mr. Fang. I have to get permission to bring anyone out where I'm at. I would love to do that. I'd like to have a situation like Jeff Williams has had in the past where he brought people out to a mine or whatever. That sounds like fun.
Yeah,
Mr. Fang says hi, Eva.
If I get to the point I need labor, I'll advertise it.
Yeah. Yep. Want to be a mucker?
Yeah.
Is that an overshot mucker? Yep.
Well,
So, as I say, we get that chance, we'll let people know.
And in the
Absolutely.
past, I have had friends and guys come up and operate or help for a week or two or whatever. Maybe they had some vacation time, and they absolutely loved it, especially when we were really getting to see some gold in the sluice boxes and moving some rock. And I would be open to doing that again in the future. It was a lot of fun. Give somebody an experience that they've kind of wanted to try, see what it's really about.
Yeah, that would be fun. As to an armor-piercing tungsten core, no, because the armor-piercing tungsten core would still look, at least to a certain extent, like an armor-piercing tungsten core. These things have no signs of fabrication on them.
No,
they just don't look fabricated at all.
It looks like it has a small amount of garnet or something in it, brown or red type garnet.
Yeah,
and it definitely is a piece of mineral or something.
It sure looks like
it's natural. It looks natural.
Like it.
Yeah,
it really looks like it. It may be something that's really doing a great job of faking us out, but it's doing a great job of faking us out. If it is, it has no visual, geometric, or anything like that signs of fabrication or artificiality.
No,
but it is so tough that I've just never run into a mineral that's this kind of tough.
You could be right, Chris. It could be a spinel.
Are they really tough? I mean, are they malleable? This is malleable. I mean, you smash it and it gets flatter. I think spinel is brittle, isn't it?
The crystals that are in there, though, whatever's in that matrix.
That could be.
It might not be. It looks like garnet when I just use the loop, but it may not be.
It's pretty hilarious. This was in dump material, so I cannot tell. When I put the magnet on the mill and run some through, I may find out.
Yeah.
If I get a chunk
in the rock
and it's actually bound up around a rock crystal or something like that, then I'll be able to tell. That's one reason I want to do that. If it was like that, real quickly, once it goes in the mill, that rock's going to just disintegrate and disappear.
Well, I had another call today to go look at another placer to do some consultant work. So I may try to do some filming on that. And whether we're able to dig up there yet this fall or not, I don't know. But there will be some better video in the future. I think it's looking better and better.
Yeah. I have
your email. Yeah, get your email there.
And first of all, you can always comment on any of my videos. I like having kind of a small group of people to watch my videos because that means I can answer every comment. So if you lose this or whatever, then just go ahead and get me to a comment, and I will go ahead and send this directly to you. But here's my email address. Oh, I've got some pretty strong magnets here, Jeff. Coulter brought them. They're rare earth magnets.
It's not backwards. Love the gallery here.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, that's a lot of pieces of meteorite
It's not
in a few square meters.
No.
Yeah.
See, now if it does turn out to be meteorites, y'all are going to apologize to me until the end of time.
Okay. I hope you got it there, Stephen. But yeah, you can always contact me there. And
I think
I generally will have discussions or no charge or anything like that. It's just, information flowing back and forth. I like to help people out, and eventually if something winds up, it winds up, but
right.
No problem there. Yeah, I know, Chris. I'm quite curious about it. This one's pretty easy, though. Being magnetic makes it a lot easier to find this stuff.
Scroll again and see if there's. Oh yeah,
there is, huh?
No response.
Really? Sometimes that can happen. I have actually seen Thalia the other day sent me a comment, and I could see it on my list of notifications. When I clicked on it, I couldn't go to it. So I'm not sure what it's YouTube black magic again.
Hey, Smiling Bear, thanks for joining us here again tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, Jeff. You do want to get, but I think Keith's idea with a magnet, that's a pretty powerful magnet right there. If that's across that little grizzly on there, it should grab a pretty good piece. If it grabs that just like, and there's not much in there, but yeah. And he'll be pouring across the magnet.
Just with those, I don't know, what would you guess, about 2 to 3 pounds? Pull that off of there.
Oh yeah.
So that's 2 or 3 pounds worth
might
of
even
force.
be more than that. That's a pretty good pull.
Yeah, these are pretty good magnets. Coulter doesn't give crap magnets, But anyhow, so I'm thinking I'll just put it right up, just above the intake, and just stick it to the face, and then as stuff pours past, and clink right up there.
Boy, Roberts, I don't know. I mean, in some places on the placer, you'll have literally like black organic mud sometimes, and then to sand, and then back into the gravels. Ideally, I'm looking for the cobble and gravels that would have caught, the better gold deeper in the drainage, deeper in the what's been eroded loose, the alluvial. When you're on the surface, yeah, a lot of times you're in sand or finer materials, but the deeper you go, ideally you're looking at bigger and bigger rocks, to where you'll see in the video, we did pull one rock up that was about the size of the bucket on the little excavator we were using, about 24-inch rock. And that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited, because that bigger rock took a lot more power and force in the water, as it was being washed out, to move that kind of rock. And a lot of times that makes for some really good gold traps when you get into big rocks.
They're not soft. Coulter, they are not.
No, they're
soft
not
at
lead or anything like that.
No, they are hard.
They're hard.
I'd say they're harder than a nail, a standard nail. This stuff is tougher than that. Let's see.
Well, some more education,
I'm sure,
and you can get to the gold magnet part.
I'm sure Chris knows whether it's gold 1 or gold 3 tricky. Did you see that question, I presume, Chris? Tricky wants to know, is it gold 1 or gold 3? Can you scratch the color off the surface? Well, let's take, here's one that's round. Okay. And
yeah, it's amazing, Jeff, what shows up in a sluice box.
Where the heck?
I don't know if you were on here when I was talking about the one night a friend of mine was running a pretty good sized placer operation, and they were getting all these tooth caps, these Chinese tooth caps, because the Chinese would they would melt their gold or take their amalgamated gold and make caps for their teeth, and they carried their money around in their mouth. That way nobody could steal it short of, taking them out. And he had a half a pint jar full of tooth caps that were all gold, and there were a lot of more amalgam. And it's like, man, that's great. They're walking around with mercury in their mouth, but that's what they did.
I'm walking around with mercury in my mouth. All my fillings are that old.
The old fillings, yeah.
Yeah.
See, now that's interesting. I was just taking this, and if I'm not mistaken, see that surface right there?
Yeah.
It looks kind of polished, right? It's kind of shiny.
It looks real metallic almost in the light, but that can be the light.
But take a look at it under the magnifier, and you can see it's a matrix that is not silvery colored.
That's what I thought.
See what I mean?
That's nickel. I really think it's nickel, which would mean you've got some type of an iron ore going on there.
I'm telling you.
It's not a meteorite.
If
I'm wrong, I'll tell you. I'm wrong then, but
wrong, you will have to admit you were wrong and apologize publicly every single time you're on the live stream until the end of time.
Hey Jeff, have you ever found any gold caps? Because that I thought that was just crazy. I'm like, would you hit a graveyard? I mean, he had enough of them, and he's like, no, we find them in the sluice box. They evidently didn't tighten them up or something, and they'd drop them or lose them.
Man.
Yeah, there's some neat things. The amount of bird shot, you'd think you were in a target range somewhere sometimes, and it's amazing what you find in a sluice box sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and in the crusher too, see these right there, they'll rattle around the crusher for a bit, and then it'll be quiet as they wind up settling just behind the wear bar on the bottom plate.
Yeah.
And so I'll be going along bucket after bucket with nothing.
And then all of a sudden,
I'll hear some stuff banging and rattling. That's why I think it may be chunks of stuff that's getting busted up a little bit too, because one bucket will have a lot more of this stuff than other buckets do.
Well, hopefully you can identify the rock it's coming from, because that may help you.
And I say, when you hear a lot of that stuff buzzing around, then you can just pull the cover plate, and they're just sitting there on the bottom. It's pretty funny. Your brass meteorite? Meteorite. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I know. I've seen a lot of lead and brass and all kinds of things. But this is, let's say, if it wasn't for the fact it doesn't look fabricated, I'd say it's steel. No big deal. And one of the things I was initially thinking was, in fact, the hard facing, because I've had that happen before.
Yeah.
And
that was my question is it a nail? Is it, hard facing? And I don't think so. It looks like it's some kind of a mineral.
Yeah, because especially when I just ground that down, if that had been like rusty steel,
it'd be consistent.
You'd see steel now. Yeah. By the time you got through that rust, because any loose rust would have got busted off real quick in that impact. Now, it would have cleaned it down to just that last layer of rust on the steel.
Yeah, to be a meteorite on a dump pile would have to be way too. There's too many coincidences there, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more likely. Y'all may end up eating.
No,
y'all may end up eating crow.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, that was wrongly said.
It's something that you're going to find in the rock once you can identify.
I think so too, but that's going to be fun. We're gonna.
Yeah, it's
I'll figure this one out if I just recover
one chunk of it with a magnet, and then you'll know.
Yeah, it would be really funny to have a chunk stuck onto a piece of rock. It's like, aha!
All right.
Now, suppose we found a new mineral.
I
Well,
guess
then obviously
Maybe we could
you're
sell
naming it,
specimens.
obviously you are naming it tinfoil heterite.
Why not? No, I didn't get an elk yet. I've seen cows.
Oh, you're talking this year?
Yeah.
No.
Not this year. No. I've seen cows, I've seen moose, I've seen everything but my elk. So I don't know. We got a couple weeks yet, so we'll see.
Well, you've probably gotten an elk sometime with your truck.
No, never hit one. I've hit deer with the truck, but no elk yet. I almost got one night. I come up a gravel road with 2 tight fences, and I just about put an elk on the hood of the truck, but thank God for good brakes.
Well, apparently in this state, you can actually get a roadkill permit.
Oh, yeah. Well, most states you can, actually.
Yeah, I told Bear.
No, haven't seen any grizzly bears either, so that's always a good thing. But
Told Bear he needs to hit an elk.
yeah, Jeff, the problem with going over to the Elkhorns is that's a little damn bull right now with a general license. You can only shoot a spike. That's it. Well, that's even worse than looking for a big bull with a herd of cows, if you ask me. Every time I've gone over to the Elkhorns, all I see is great, big, beautiful bulls. So it just frustrates me to go over there to shoot a spike because you can't hardly find a spike bull.
Yeah, John.
That
makes sense to me.
Yeah, big ones.
John goes, aliens stashed it in your mind long ago.
Could be.
Now, that would be a valuable mineral specimen.
Woo-hoo,
Yeah.
the permit is available at no cost, Bear. Now
What?
you really got to hit a deer.
We just need some snow, and then we'll
There's a real
we'll tag
serious
out.
cost associated with hitting a deer. It's not
with
the
our
permit.
buffer, there isn't.
I don't
Yeah.
know, Jeff, who got the big bull tags over there. I never did hear, but every time I go over in that area at all, even looking at mines, I inevitably see, 4 or 5 beautiful bulls, and it's frustrating to go over there and only be able to shoot a spike. So yeah, Resort Dog, that's the grizzly issue here is getting a little out of hand, but
I understand from your house down there and you want to get it fixed up. Okay. Yeah, you take care of yourself. Everything's going okay here.
yeah, Jeff, if you get one that sticks around your camp, it gets a little annoying after a couple of days because you start to really get a little jittery. That happened to me one year up there. I decided on the 4th day I was going to annihilate the thing, and he was gone by then. And I got him on a game camera. He went over into the next drainage. But after a couple days of them being around your camp nonstop, you do get a little jumpy. I've only had one make a false charge at me, and I vowed that is never happening again.
Well, I heard when I was in Idaho, they said that the grizzlies would come to a gunshot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll come for a kill. And they smell blood in the wind. They're going to be there.
And they definitely are not going to just let you do that yourself. They want to volunteer to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's way too much meat to take home. Man.
I don't want to give up an elk if I get one.
Well,
I'll give up the gut pile or whatever, but the whole idea is the meat in the freezer.
Is bear meat good?
I haven't had grizzly yet, but that could happen.
Yeah. I agree, Resort Dog. I don't like the competition, the evolutionary competition.
Right. No, there's a evolutionary ladder there that you don't want to cross the rungs on.
I definitely don't want to have an equal discussion with a wild animal that wants to have a discussion with me.
No. And this time of the year, they're really hungry going into cold weather, and the last thing you want to be is lunch or have lunch with one.
Yeah. Oh dear. It must be that time again.
It's that time again.
Well, when we come back, I thought I would talk about some research because that's something a lot of you will be doing over the winter, hopefully, looking for your next place to go. So,
I wouldn't take a 9mm against a grizzly. You just annoy them. Yep. No,
You take a 9mm against anything.
Yeah.
The least I'd be using is my 44 mag, preferably a 12-gauge slug or the
Howdy, everybody.
Yeah, rifle. Preferably
So I am
lead.
somewhat back here. Hello.
Lead poison. Oops.
I don't think a grizzly would even notice a 9mm. That would be kind of along the lines of a horse fly to one of the grizzlies.
All 13 shells and maybe.
Howdy.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
How far
Just
away
maybe.
they got to be for you to get 13 into them before he eats you?
Not that far before you want to be pumping that kind of small gun.
Yeah, I'm feeling marginally better. Okay, people. That's as far as we're going to go here. We're feeling marginally better. So let's take a look at some mining news first. Newcrest is to acquire the Pretium resources in a $2.8 billion deal. Australia's Newcrest Mining has entered into an agreement to acquire all outstanding common shares of Pretium Resources, does not already own, in a deal that values the Canadian miner at $2.8 billion, with a B. Pretium's board of directors has unanimously recommended shareholders vote in favor of the transaction and have entered into voting support agreements with respect to all the Pretium shares they control. Pretium is the owner of the Brucejack operation in the highly prospective Golden Triangle region of British Columbia, Canada. Last month, Pretium made a new high-grade ore exploration discovery at the Golden Marmot zone on the Brucejack property, located roughly 3.5 kilometers north of the Valley of the Kings deposit. The company said it had received assays for the first 9 drill holes, 8 of which intersected gold with a highlight of 53.5 meters, grading 72.5 grams per ton gold, including 50 centimeters, grading 6,700 grams per ton gold, and 3,930 grams per ton silver.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to crush. That's going to squish in the crusher.
Brucejack began commercial production in July 2017 and is one of the highest grade operating gold mines in the world. Pretium's technical support by March 9th, 2020 estimated gold production of 311,000 ounces per annum at an all-in sustaining cost of $743 per ounce of gold over a projected 13-year mine life. Now, I do not know how good that is since Bear has taken off. So, but it sounds like a pretty darn interesting project to me. Brucejack and surrounding tenements are within the traditional territories asserted by the Tsetsautski and Tatlan nations. Sorry, Bear, there's no pronouncing that. The acronym is TSKLH and the Tatlan nation, and in the Nass area of Nizhga's nation as defined in the Nizhga's final agreement. Brucejack is approximately 140 kilometers from Newcrest's majority-owned and operated Red Chris mine, located on Tahltan territory. Newcrest will become the operator and 100% owner of Brucejack following completion of the transaction, which is currently targeted Q1 calendar 2022. We are delighted to be expanding our presence in this highly prospective region in British Columbia. Brucejack is a Tier 1 mine in a Tier 1 jurisdiction and will deliver immediate production, free cash flow, and earnings diversification to Newcrest and will fit seamlessly into our long-life, low-cost portfolio, Newcrest CEO Sandeep Biswas said in a media release. The combination of Newcrest and Pretium will create the leading gold miner in British Columbia's Golden Triangle, operating both the Brucejack and Red Chris mines. Wow, sounds like a sweet deal for all involved. So that is kind of cool. Chile cuts their forecast for mining investments to $69 billion through 2030, which is rather interesting. Chile's State Copper Commission, Cochilco, said on Sunday the country should receive $68.9 billion in mining investments through the end of the decade. down 6.9% from the previous forecast as 2 projects were removed from the pipeline. Interesting. 5 new mining projects were added, Cohilco said, involving copper, gold, iron, and industrial minerals. Some 27.8% of the pipeline's value will be focused on state-owned miners, Codelco and Enami, and the vast majority of funds will be put into copper mining. Chile is the world's top producer of the red metal. Codelco pushed back to 2035 the beginning of operations of its $3.2 billion expansion Andina copper project. It also cut investment costs worth $1.95 billion. Neighboring Peru, the world's number 2 copper producer, has a mining projects pipeline estimated by the government to be worth about $50 billion. Rather interesting that they're decreasing copper when the demand for copper is going through the roof, but, who knows? Government strange things happen, apparently. BHP sheds more Australian coal mines in $1.35 billion deal. Bear, there may be questions on here that you might want to refer to. BHP has inked a deal to divest up to $1.35 billion in metallurgical coal assets in Australia as part of the world's largest miners' retreat from fossil fuels. They're retreating from fossil fuels. I wonder why. That's a little bit bizarre. The company is selling its 80% stake in BHP Mitsui Coal, which operates in the South Walker Creek and Poitrel coking coal mines in Queensland, to Junior Stanmore Resources. The remaining stake in the joint venture is owned by Japan's Mitsui. The deal includes $1.1 billion cash on completion, $100 million in cash 6 months later, and possibly up to $150 million payout in the 2024 calendar year linked to prices. The agreement, excluding the potential price-linked payment, represents an enterprise value to EBITDA multiple of 6.9 times, BHP said. Stanmore Resources, which is developing its Isaac Downs coking coal project in the Bowen Basin, said in a separate statement it's intended to fund the acquisition with a $625 million debt facility and a $600 million equity raising. If the acquisition of BHP's stake in BMC is approved, Stanmore, the majority owned by Singapore-listed Golden Energy and Resources, will become a significant force in the Australian coal industry. As the world decarbonizes. Really? BHP is sharpening its focus on producing higher quality metallurgical coal sought after by global steel makers to help increase efficiency and lower emissions, Edgar Bastow, head of BHP's Minerals Australia business, said in a media statement. BHP put its stake in BMC up for grabs last year when it also announced plans to exit thermal coal. Since then, it has sold its stake in the Cerrejón coal mine in Colombia to Glencore and announced plans to merge its oil and gas assets with Australia's Woodside Petroleum, which completed in August. The global miners' decision to exit coal was not any push toward becoming fossil fuel-free, Chief Executive Officer Mike Henry said at the group's annual meeting in London last month. Really? That's interesting. It was simply a cold eyes assessment of how those commodities fit with the BHP portfolio. So yeah, it was becoming fossil fuel-free. Yeah. This corporate doublespeak is really bizarre sometimes, people. BHP remains Australia's largest producer and exporter of metallurgical coal as an equal partner in a separate alliance with Mitsubishi Corporation. That joint venture operates 7 mines and owns and operates the Hay Point Coal Terminal in Australia, one of the world's largest coal export ports. BHP committed in 2019 $400 million over 5 years to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from its operations and mined commodities. It's also vowed to reduce its Scope 3 emissions, those generated by customers using the company's commodities, which are 40 times greater than those generated by its mines and oil fields. Steel is an important component in many of the products driving the decarbonization process, but its production accounts for as much as 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions and about 75% of BHP's Scope 3 emissions. The company is working with industry giants, including China Baowu Steel and Japan's JFE Steel, on ways to reduce manufacturers' carbon footprints. It's also earmarked a further $75 million to partnerships focused on steel decarbonization with 4 of its major steelmaking customers, but warned the road to the sector's net zero emissions remains uncertain.
Steel making net zero?
Yes, that's the newest thing, Bear. Actually, they're now thinking that with decarbonization and something else, they can make it better than net zero.
Yeah.
Really? I'm serious. He does not believe that. He really does not believe that, apparently. I don't know why Bear would not believe that. I really don't. But he apparently does not.
Aside from using enormous amounts of electricity to process steel in an arc furnace, you pretty much use coal.
And in the gold industry here.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can find out about gold today.
But they bought credits, yeah.
One would think something was going on with that nonsense. No idea what. Oh, go away, you stupid thing. Give me 1 second here so I can get something up.
1001, 1002.
Not my fault, it's the internet. Now, gold breakout confirmed. Almost. Gold finished solidly above the $1,800 announced level on Friday, marking the yellow metal's best weekly close since late August. More importantly, gold may be breaking out of a larger consolidation pattern that has been in force since prices peaked in August of last year. Prices edged above the descending triangle line, although perhaps not convincingly so. If the breakout is real, then we should see a follow-through advance this week to confirm it. Interpreting chart patterns is more an art than a science. Well, that's one way of putting it, people. Not exactly what I would have said. I see it right up there with, essential oils and other forms of glue that probably don't work 90% of the time. But, who am I? I'm just a chicken in tinfoil hat here. Interpreting chart patterns is more an art than a science. Any given technical setup, whether bullish or bearish, can fall. Traders who lack conviction in the underlying fundamental case for gold will bail out of their positions the moment they read something bearish in the price action. They may get lucky with some trades, but they'll likely never realize the massive gains that come from holding through the duration of a major bull market. That requires conviction. Yes, it does. Actually, I agree here.
I've never been convicted of anything.
Fortunately, the fundamental reasons to invest in precious metals at this time, with stagflation likely looming in 2022 and beyond, are compelling. Loose monetary policy and rising inflation bode well for hard assets in general. Gold and silver, in particular, are uniquely well situated to benefit from a potential currency crisis. Gold and silver are forms of hard money. No other commodity or collectible serves that unique function. That's important to keep in mind when investing, not just for inflation, but for the potential of a severe downturn in the economy or loss of confidence in the U.S. dollar.
No.
Oh, that would never happen. Never. No, never. Gold shows virtually no correlation with the business cycle and can sometimes move in the opposite direction of conventional asset markets. It has underperformed stocks as well as many other types of hard assets year to date. Frustrating though that may be for the gold bulls, the divergence isn't anything for long-term holders to worry about. It represents an opportunity to switch out of assets that have appreciated considerably and into precious metals, which are relatively undervalued. The pendulum of investor sentiment will eventually swing away from the stock market and its sky-high valuations. It will in time swing toward safe havens, toward hard assets, and ultimately toward hard money, which I tend to agree with. I personally am a fan of hard money. I really am. The Fed's stunning inflation abdication. Now, this has been an interesting progression in our inflation world. First, the media was saying that inflation was strictly a figmentation of our imagination. It simply was not happening. Then the Fed was saying that the inflation was transitory, strictly transitory. Obviously, it wasn't going to be anything else. So to the extent there was inflation, it is transitory. Then the Fed started having little feelers broadcast by their various talking heads and other empty-headed apparatchiks brooding about the idea that, you know, the 2% inflation baseline that they want to hold is probably too low, and they should consider moving up to a 4% inflation baseline permanently forever and ever, which kind of had me scratch my head a little bit, because it's like, okay, guys, you know, real inflation's been running hotter than 4% for quite a while anyway, but since they changed the math, nobody knows this. So it did not surprise me when shortly after those messages went out, the Fed started admitting that perhaps, just perhaps, the current transitory inflation is going to be transitory for at least another year. That's transitory, I mean, in terms of geologic time, or you know, the cycle, the solar cycle. A couple of years of hot inflation is very transitory indeed. Well, now there's a new talking point that is beginning to circulate through the propagandist department that call themselves journalists. This is a good one. They're now making the case that inflation is a good thing. Inflation is a good thing. Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, the inflation has left the average American far better off than they were before Lockdown 1.0. Lockdown 1.0 was a good thing too. It was actually the saving grace of our economy. I believe it was MSLSD that said that. Whoops, MSNBC that was saying this today. Something along the lines of something lockdown meant everybody was spending less and saving more money. Something unemployment stimulus meant that the poorest Americans ended up coming out of lockdown significantly better off than they were going into it. Yeah, the rich got a little richer, but America as a whole gained $13.5 trillion in value from lockdown. Wow, maybe we should have stayed locked down forever and we'd all be billionaires by now. But no, we're not going to go. They're probably going to go there, but I ain't going to go there. So the consensus of opinion is, because we all gained a whole bunch of money that is effectively worth significantly less anyway, we're all ahead of the game, and inflation is a good thing. It's going to be interesting to see how this talking point develops over time. It really is, because we went from inflation, what inflation, to nonsense. It's strictly transitory. Don't even pay attention to it. It's so transitory it'll be gone before you have a chance to pay attention to it. Oh, look, a squirrel. To, well, you know, we'd probably be better off if we had higher inflation as a standard fiscal policy anyway. And now we are moved to stage 4. You are here. Inflation is actually a great positive. This is the same crew of people who are looking at the head of the CDC as some sort of a modern guru now that she is beginning to float the notion that masking should be a permanent part of our society because common cold and flu. Yeah, that came out this week too. All kinds of interesting things have come out of the delusional world of DC there this week. It's been an interesting week in the news cycle. I did notice that Peter Doocy is asking the serious questions when he's talking to the administration's current mouthpiece of Sauron that is busy there on the press conferences. So I am pleased that at least someone is asking the important questions.
Baghdad Barbie.
I don't know what we're going to name this new one that's talking, Saint Justine Pierre, or whatever her name is. She's an interesting one, that one is. She really is. The Fed's stunning inflation abdication. When will precious metals markets finally make their move? Good question. It's a question that's frustrated many investors in 2021. Gold and silver prices have remained stubbornly range-bound for the past several months. Of course, this would have nothing to do with manipulation of the paper market. We all know that.
Nah.
There's no way to know exactly when this consolidation period will end. The banks will let us know. When 4 banks agree in concert and reach consensus on a new price, we'll get there. Okay? The banks will know. Just watch them. However, there are signs, both technical and fundamental, that point to a major directional move coming in the relatively near future. One of them flashed on Wednesday following the Federal Reserve's latest policy announcement. Their definition of the word policy may be different from mine here. As expected, officials said they plan to begin withdrawing some of their emergency stimulus in the face of surging inflation pressures in the economy. They will still be stimulating already overheated markets, just at a more tapered pace. This is akin to those Republicans who were celebrating keeping that whole infrastructure thing that just passed to a mere 1.2 or 1.5 trillion dollars, you know. So they're tapering the pace of overheating our market. That's nice of them. It really is. Price levels have risen so rapidly in recent months that Fed Chief Jerome Powell had to essentially walk back his oft-repeated transitory assurances by redefining the meaning of the term. Well, isn't that how this is supposed to work? I mean, we
depends on the
redefine.
definition of definition.
We redefine the meaning of the word that begins with a V that we don't talk about. That's been redefined too. Inflation has come in higher than expected, he admitted. The level of inflation we have right now is not consistent with price stability. No. I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you. In fact, it's not consistent with the Fed's own statutory mandate. Since when have they ever paid attention to their statutory mandate? You know, then.
They pay
Silly.
plenty attention
Powell
to when they're
blames
fudging
supply
the numbers.
bottlenecks, denying any culpability in driving higher than expected costs through monetary policies. I don't think we're behind the curve, he insisted. It will be premature to raise rates today. Powell is taking an astonishing position for a central banker, namely that he is unwilling at this time to pursue price stability as required by the Fed's own dual mandate. An unusual position for a central banker, really. Maybe that's because he is a crappy central banker. Of course, it might be because the Fed's interests are inimical to our own, too. Instead, he hopes, that inflation rates will move down on their own by the second or third quarter of 2022. Never before has a Federal Reserve chairman so openly flouted the responsibility to fight inflation. Powell no longer even denies inflation's gotten out of hand. He just refuses to do anything meaningful about it. Wow, you know, that's kind of a trend with the current administration, it seems. And next year, new excuses may emerge. The Fed may even start verbalizing what it sees as the benefits of high inflation. Yeah, that's why they started broadcasting it in the media about a month ago. These guys are a little behind the curve on this article. I'm going to write to them about that. In another deflection of responsibility for its unwillingness to stop creating inflation, investors should take note of this insanity and act accordingly. Given that interest rates will remain artificially suppressed well below the inflation rate, dangerous economic and market distortions will continue to build. It is dangerous to buy risk assets such as stock at artificially inflated valuations. It's especially dangerous to own false safe havens such as bonds when their yields are so low they're virtually guaranteed to deliver negative real returns. Don't fight the Fed may be a mantra with common sense appeal, but a wise investor doesn't look only at those asset classes the Fed is trying to stimulate directly. A wise investor also anticipates unannounced, unintended, potentially unpleasant consequences of Fed stimulus that can devastate the portfolios of the unprepared. The last thing central bankers and their beneficiaries on Wall Street want to see is a massive flight from financial assets into gold and silver. But market history shows that Fed-fueled asset booms always lead to busts, whether in nominal, real terms, or both. The gold chart shows prices forming a massive descending triangle pattern over the past year and a half, with major support at $1,675 an ounce and resistance coming in around the 1,800 level. The market will ultimately break either above or below the consolidating pattern. Since it formed from an all-time high in August 2020, the triangle carries more bullish implications than one might appear within the context of a larger downtrend. But anything is possible in these markets, including false breakouts and false breakdowns that whipsaw short-term momentum traders. Long-term investors need not worry about day-to-day price action, except insofar as value opportunities for accumulation emerge. Despite lackluster price action, bullion investors have been buying heavily this year, so much so that coin premiums remain elevated, and many money metals' weaker competitors are struggling to keep up with demand. As with other areas of the economy where shortages are helping to drive massive price hikes, the same phenomenon could soon be seen in precious metals markets. How soon? Stay tuned. Yeah, how soon is the question. So, yeah, that's basically where we are in terms of the imaginary inflation that turned out to be transitory, that isn't transitory, and should be kept at a higher level anyway, just because, and is definitely a positive thing. Oh, it's been such a good news week this week. I mean, let's see. This week, we realized that Lord Malarkey was completely unaware that the DOJ had decided to allow itself to be sued and is in negotiation with unauthorized individuals who chose to cross our border in an unauthorized fashion with small children during the Trump administration. And they may all become potential millionaires because of that action.
How about the ACLU's lawyers? They get about a third, don't they?
Yeah, they probably get a third or so. I mean, they'll be nice and they'll only take a third.
Well, they're talking $1 billion, so that's like a third of $1 billion to the ACLU. Nice payoff.
Well, that's because ACLU. Now, we're going to overlook the fact that, first of all, the former administration was acting in accordance with the law and the Flores decision. They would have been violating the law had they not done what they did. We're also going to overlook the fact that the Obama administration did the same thing for several years before, and the Biden administration is doing exactly the same thing now. I don't think that the ACLU is going to overlook the fact that if they actually get these payments, or any payments whatsoever, everybody is going to become eligible. This is a lawyer's wet dream in terms of fees. So, got to hand it to the ACLU. As lawyers go, they are very, very, very dedicated lawyers. It should also be noted that Lord Malarkey apparently knew nothing at all about this deal and pronounced it was fake news and garbage. Then he said that no, after the ACLU publicly called out the administration and said that perhaps his staff needed to brief him on the issue, he came out and said that, yeah, I am absolutely for it, even though I said before it was absolutely garbage and was not going to happen anyway. I'm absolutely for it. It absolutely should happen. And I have no idea how much money we're talking about. I don't think Lord Malarkey knows how much money anybody's talking about at any point. Though, apparently, according to Camilla Bowles Parker, as much as I just like the woman, in this case I really like her, according to her, Lord Malarkey had an extraordinary problem of flatulence during the COP26. She hasn't stopped talking about it since. Poor old dude. You know, I mean, what can we say? And Senorita Circleback has apparently disappeared for the moment. Gavin Newsom has apparently also disappeared for the moment.
Yep.
Sadly, Gavin Newsom can still sign executive orders wherever the heck he is, you know, so it's not like he's permanently gone. He's just staying out of sight these days. And the new White House secretary is being treated very well by Peter Doocy. He is very polite, he is very persistent, and he's asking questions that she doesn't want to answer. It was very funny when she got backed into a corner on the issue of these payments to people who were separated from their children, because Peter actually asked her the question that any logical person would ask here. So does this mean we're going to start giving large sums of money to legal immigrants that come to this country? And she said, of course not. Why would we do that? Well, then why would we give money to other people? And, you know, he's asking the good questions here. We'll give him that. Now, there are still shortages going on. The list is getting longer by the day. The list will continue to get longer, and the beatings will continue until morale improves because the pileup of cargo ships is continuing to grow. The pileup of containers in the ports is continuing to grow. The new measures the ports are taking to try to extort money are going to be largely ineffective. And now there's actually kind of less stuff moving at the moment than there was before that whole mess started. So it's going to be a very, very interesting winter. And yes, your favorite snack foods are going to face a shortage. So will your most wildly popular Christmas toys, your tech gear, your car parts, your magnesium, your batteries, your tires, your various lubricating fluids of various types, and a whole lot of other stuff. But the administration is hoping that the average price of gasoline does not go over $4 a gallon. And the energy secretary said, well, yes, everyone's energy prices are going up this winter. And when asked, what could be done about this, she threw back her head and laughed in the most dulcet tones. I will say her cackle is much better than Kamala's, okay? Her cackle is great. And she said that was a hilarious question, that there was nothing she could do to increase the production of energy within the United States. And it was entirely outside of her control. So
This
we
is
can
the
only,
energy secretary, right?
yes,
Okay,
Granholm.
just checking.
So we can only hope that the average price of gasoline does not go up over $4 a gallon. And by the way, right now the price of diesel is up around $3.73 a gallon. That makes truckers unhappy. Also, right now in various Pilot, TA, and Love's truck stops around the country, many of them are limiting the diesel to 50 gallons per fill up because it's moving a little more slowly than usual. But yes, our energy secretary, I am pleased to report, has a much better cackle than Kamala. She definitely has a better cackle than Kamala. She said that it was hilarious to suggest that she could do anything at all about energy prices. She also said that she didn't have a magic wand she could wave. I don't know why these people, had to break the magic wands that the former administration left behind that any idiot could use, but apparently they did. They got to have sour grapes, apparently. And so in the beatings will continue until morale improves category, we can expect our energy prices to continue to rise, especially since the administration is now contemplating shutting down another already existing and working gas pipeline. I'll tell you, if the news gets any better, I don't know what we are going to do with ourselves. I really don't. This is going so very well. I am inspired by just how stunningly they are handling their amazing policy. Oh, and Mr. Buttigieg, who is back from his parental leave after he and his partner had their twins, Mr. Buttigieg is going to be working on the problem of our racist highway system. I'm overcome with emotion. We're no longer going to have racist highways. It's just stunning. It's stunning. It really is. I'm nearly speechless.
And on that note.
Yeah, and on that note, I shall turn you back to the men. Keep stocking up, people, because I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but the prices are still going up at anywhere from 3 to 15% month over month on various staples. This is going to be a difficult year. Night.
Good point, Chris. That would seem like oppression.
Yeah,
By definition, if you were in the driver's seat, you would be superior, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
It's just too bizarre for me.
Yeah, it's getting pretty bizarre.
Oh no, we haven't begun to see bizarre yet. These guys are
Every
just
day
getting
is
warmed up.
every day has gotten more interesting.
Okay, so Jimmy here has got his presentation.
I don't know. It's not a real formal presentation, but I thought, we could talk about, research, because I think for any of you, if you're going to go into an area, you really want to do some research. Nobody likes doing it, but it can really help to benefit what you're looking at and what you're looking for. You can start with, history books of the mining districts are a good place to start. The Mining Journal, California Mining Journal, has a lot of good articles on different districts over the years that Chris Ralph and some of the guys have done for as far as the United States. U.S. Bureau of Mines looking for reports and maps. And there's a lot of interesting stuff within the U.S. Bureau of Mines, which some of it is also online. You can go to libraryguides.mines out of the Colorado School of Mines, has a lot of historic data on old mines and mining districts. Yeah, exactly, Chris. That's another good resource that a lot of people don't know about, as well as the International Journal of Mining Science, which is somewhat one in the same with what you're talking. And I think it's Science and Technology, if I remember right. That they have a lot of interesting cross information that you can go into. MnDAT, which is what you were using earlier here when you were throwing us some sources. The MRDS has world coverage on mineral resource data system is what it's called. Lots of good information that you can readily available for certain areas and pretty much worldwide in their case. When you get more local, mylandsmatter.org is another one that you can go into and check on some mining, especially here in the northern part here in Montana. Actually, MyLands is a lot of times more updated than even some of the BLM stuff. Let's see, state mineral offices. Some states you literally want to go to the state mineral office or the state geologist. He'll have a lot of information. Land grant colleges, your universities, you can have some good geologic professors, as well as thesis papers. And this is one a lot of people miss, but there's a lot of times thesis papers that were never completely published into the public that the colleges have. And sometimes the Bureau of Mines will have some of them because the students, in order to do their doctorate, would pick an area and study it fairly intensely. And it's not that they're always correct, but their analogies a lot of times can lead you to some more information or some more questions that'll, you can help you find the answer you're looking for. So that's a really good one that I've used a few times, is look for thesis papers that were written by students trying to do their doctorate. Because in a lot of cases, it took them 2 or 3 years studying an area and going out to mines and going, maybe even working at a mine doing their doctorate. Yeah, exactly, Jeff. I mean, and I'm going to get into hitting the ground, I think next Monday night. And, the things I take with and then what I start doing once I'm on the ground. But I think really starting with some research so you can understand the area a little bit better before you ever even go there can possibly lead you, in the right direction. The local historical societies, there's a real underused source sometimes, because you can find diaries. The local historical society sometimes will have contacts. You may be able to get in contact with an old miner who's 80, 90 years old that has lived in that area his whole life. And some of what he tells you might be bullshit, but there's probably a certain level of truth in the things he's telling you, or possibly introducing you to somebody else that can give you some information, a family member or somebody else on a specific area. So that's another, and basically in a personal contact that can help a lot. Local historical society, old newspapers, a lot of, especially here in Montana, almost every little town had a newspaper that was published at least for a certain period of time. And they made notes about what the locals were doing every day. Who came in with a strike, what mine was hiring guys. And you can learn a lot from that little bit of paper sometimes. So there's a lot of ways to go out and search, not just using Google and things. Yeah, Keith.
Another thing that I have run into, primarily on My Land Matters.
Yeah.
But the older topo map showed a lot more of the mining stuff than the newer ones.
They have taken a lot of it off of the newer maps.
And it seems like when you zoom out, you get more to the 15-minute series maps instead of the 7.5s, which were not updated as much. There is stuff where I can see a mine name on the 15-minute map that's not on the 7.5-minute map.
I like
this.
I like the 7.5-minute maps. I actually have one right here in front of me. I like the 7.5 just to give me a kind of a lay of the ground in possibly some of the old roads. But even a lot of times now on the newer maps, they're taking out those old 2-track roads or mine roads. They're not showing them because they literally don't want you to go there. Is a lot of what's happening. Another source going through.
They're updating the 7.5-minute maps, so they're not updating the 15. That's cool.
And right now that's great until they do. Keep going in and changing, taking stuff out of the maps.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Chris, I mean, that's a cool deal if you can, literally pay for access and get, have some other people, you can have them doing some archiving and finding things for you. A lot of stuff is slowly coming online, especially like through the Bureau of Mines and that. They've been trying to move it from microfiche and old paper onto, modern day systems. And that's always cool. Jeff, I do use, when I get to mapping, I do use Google Maps. I've used Onyx quite a bit, and the Onyx system is pretty neat. But now Base Maps has come along. That's actually the hat I got on. Base Maps has come out with more and more layers that you can put on a map. The topography, you can get the satellite views. I had kind of talked to them about even coming out with a mineral style, because to have it on your phone in the field is pretty darn cool. I'm not familiar, Chris, with Cal Topo, but I'll bet you it's pretty interesting.
One thing that I ran into literally just this week, because they're getting more and more of this information, specifically the BLM, the forms that are required to file a mining claim in Montana do not require you to provide a map showing the claim on the section.
Right.
However, BLM now has started to require that. So if you send in the forms properly filled out, you may get a letter
similar to his,
kind of like that, that says, we need you to provide supplemental information. Now, I mean, to give you an idea, they sent actual maps of just the sections and stuff. But so if you're filing mineral claims now with the BLM, even if your state doesn't require it, you are going to have to draw a section or an aliquot of a section and show how the claim lays on it. Otherwise, BLM will not finish processing your stuff. So just be aware.
They do want a map. And that kind of brings us, as far as maps, if you're going to go into an area, you definitely want to go to BLM on the MLRS or on the old LR 2000, either one, and try to locate whatever is fairly current in the area for existing claims. So you're not claim jumping, and you kind of get an idea of what could be open. They're trying to get it updated, but even at this point on current claims that we just filed, and that a lot of that's not getting into the system for 6-8 months. So they're not even that current unless you call BLM and tell them a specific, section and range that you're looking at. They may be able to give you an update on if any new claims were put in there in the last month or two. It's kind of frustrating because they are so far behind, which is, happening typical government. County recorder's office is sometimes a good option for looking at anything current, what's been filed lately. And possibly if you got an old historic mine, county's recorder's office sometimes had some really good notes on the annual assessment work and things that were filed at the county level. So there could be some really good county records sometimes. So that's another source. Another source that gets overlooked is old aviation maps. Because in the old days, when we jump back, 50, 60 years, a lot, especially the small pilots, were flying by sight. And the stuff on the ground is marked on the old aviation maps. The mines, the towers, the high spots on the hills. A lot of that information is on the old aviation maps. And those are maps that you can't go buy at the gas station or anything. So hunting up old aviation maps is quite interesting.
Where do you get those?
If you look for aviation companies, like one that I used to get maps from and a lot of even satellite imagery from was Mark Hurd Aviation. They had satellite maps and overhead visuals and stuff from stuff that goes all the way back into the 1940s and 50s when they were taking aerial photography. Mm-hmm. And they did that all over pretty much most of the United States. They did a lot of it over Russia and things too under the government, which they wouldn't provide to you because at that time it was all military. But there is some interesting, USGS has some really good satellite imagery. Google Earth has actually gotten a lot better in the last couple of years as far as being able to blow up an area, make a map. And this is just for instance, Keith and I were talking about earlier, but I basically, I'll pull out, and when I'm doing a claim area or something, I'll pull out, do a map, put in my corners, and then I've got enough visual of the ground. I can tell where I can maybe park and walk in and do a corner and see how I can access different areas. So I'll make up these 13 by 17 or whatever, 11 by 17 maps just for my own reference on stuff as I do claims. So really doing some research will help you before you get on the ground, before you really go boots on the ground. And I think that'll be kind of the next thing that I'll cover next week is going into looking at, okay, now we go on the ground. What are we kind of looking for and how do we go about doing our own map and things like that to learn as much as you can in the area and where to go test or where to really be looking for changes in types of rock and things like that. And Jeff, as you get into this, the more you learn, a lot of this just becomes natural things that you do as a prospector. But we've got a lot of guys that are newer to prospecting and hunting minerals or rock, whether it's gems or your metal detecting or whatever. The more you know about an area and the more you can understand the geology in that area, the better your chances are going to be that you can put boots on the ground to go in there with your metal detector, and use an old road for access or an old trail or figure out how everything lays. The more comfortable you're going to be looking at that ground and not looking at, now, how do I find my way out of here? You want to spend your time productively.
And that file thing there towards the back.
Yeah.
Think of those orange ones. You see what says placer section form?
Yeah. You got one right here.
Okay. here's a little tool that I use. This is a representation of an exact 1 mile square, which is not necessarily what a section is on the ground. And at every latitude, your longitude changes the distance per degree because the longitude approaches 0 at the poles. And so I've got these forms made up where I can actually see if I start here at 0, 0 and plug in the actual GPS coordinates of that corner of the section, I can go up here and just see how many feet and how many degrees it plots out as. And therefore I can say, okay, here's where I want my claim, and figure out what the GPS coordinates of that are going to be. I can also go on the ground and find a GPS coordinate and then plot from there and see, okay, 1,500 feet west, what is my GPS coordinate going to be? That's what these scales here are for example. In this particular case, at the latitude around here, 1,500 feet east-west is 0.0060 degrees, or 0.3627 minutes. So if I'm orienting it east-west, I know, okay, if this is one corner, this is what my GPS has to read at the other corner on the east-west. Likewise, north, and you'll notice the difference. 1,500 feet in a north direction is 0.0041 degrees, as opposed to 0.0060 degrees east-west. So I've made up this form just to make life a lot easier for me when I'm doing all the calculations, especially in the field. Yeah, because once I get a GPS on my Discovery Monument or something like that, I can do all the other calculations in the field pretty simply that way.
Then the next thing is to look at geologic maps. Look for fault lines, slips, strikes. If you go to a good geologic map, it'll tell you all different kinds of soils and rocks and what's out there. You know, I don't know how well that actually shows up on camera, but you can get copies of these in, 30-minute by 60-minute quadrangles for most mineralized areas within the United States. And when you start to look at the drainages and then maybe even overlay other maps with it, you'll start to get a sense of where the gold or where the mineral possibly was coming from, where the intrusives are, maybe the granite intrusives or some kind of volcanic activity took place. Another map that I use quite a bit is the gravity aeromagnetics that they did. In some areas, they did quite extensive stuff with aerial magnetics for finding metallic reference from the air. And when you get into these maps, these are big maps as well, but they can definitely pinpoint. These are actually really, they become really big maps when you get them folded out. But they also have breakdowns of smaller areas. And these are the high metallic areas. The darker the red and the finer the lines, the higher the magnetic anomaly. And it could be magnetite, it could be iron ore. You literally have to get boots on the ground to start to identify some of that. But the anomalies can really lead you to the parts of the structures that were probably fairly hot that brought up that kind of mineralization. There is radioactivity maps as well. The majority of these are magnetic anomaly, in this case. But by overlaying maps, you really can zero in on areas that there's a lot of things that start to fit together.
How about gravity maps? Do they have those too? Gravity anomalies?
There is this map does actually have gravity anomaly on it if you get to the right part here.
Okay.
It basically starts to show you the structural and stratigraphic divisions within the area that you're kind of going and digging through here, or going to go, let's say, walk and do some hunting on. That's gravity anomaly, that map right there.
Okay.
So that's gravity anomaly. And we've even, I don't know, recently in this copper thing that I've been working on, we did use some satellite imagery from a NASA satellite and a Russian satellite, because what they're capable of. They actually started using this down in Australia to see if they could find accuracy within this, how they were using it. And it worked out fairly well. So they started kind of doing it around the world. It's not cheap to do, but they were able to honestly identify the intrusive granite or granderite against the limestone, against the garnet, and literally give us images of where you start to get intersections of all those types of things. It was quite interesting. And it hadn't been used much besides Australia. They're starting to use it in South Africa on some flyover missions, or stuff over there with satellites. I think in the future we're going to see a lot more of it.
Well, as they get drones that can do that kind of stuff easily.
They're getting drones now where you can do LiDAR, you can do aerial magnetics. There's some neat stuff coming out with drones that are still damn expensive, though. Nothing's, gotten that cheap. Although I think inevitably you'll have more people that are capable of doing it, and that's going to help with price too.
Synthetic aperture radar.
Yeah. And there's a lot of neat science that we didn't have, 20, 30 years ago that's coming along. The one night I was talking about the new LiDAR app, even on the new iPhone 13. And there's just some really neat technology that has a lot of use within mining and minerals. Anybody have any questions? But this stuff's at your disposal. You kind of got to do your research to find some information. But if you've got an area picked out, you really want to do some homework, because if you can identify from the old mine reports or anything, what kind of rock were they finding the mineral that you're looking for in? Then you can go to some of the geologic maps and look for that types of rock against the granite or against some rhyolite or whatever, and you can take your hunting to a different level than just go out there and meander. And that's where most people get frustrated. They go out and they try metal detecting or that, they're not finding anything, and after a while they're frustrated. And that's just not learning to correctly. If you didn't start right, it's hard to get on the right track. And, unless you have a teacher or somebody that you can bounce questions and learn. Ideally, that's the best scenario, is learn from somebody else's mistakes if you can.
Can I learn from your mistakes?
Well, I'm trying to learn from yours.
Oh, man.
So,
The blind leading the blind.
Yeah,
huh?
kind of. But, hey, that's how we learn. Like here in Montana, and we've talked about this before, you've got gold placers of Montana. There is one like this of gold placers of Arizona. There's one in Nevada. There's a bunch of these that have all the gold-bearing areas and drainages. They tell you some history. There's a couple of pages of the reference material in here that you can go back and look for those reports. Yeah, I know, Jeff. It's one of my Bibles too. I mean, Rob's book, Gold Placers of Montana. I've tried to build a library over the years of the stuff that, to me, is damn important. And, you know, Robin's book definitely is. The placer Bible is probably one of the most well-written things on placer mining that has ever been written. There was another geologist up in British Columbia, I believe, that did a lot of really good information, and they kind of put something together up there. And I've only seen parts of that. I never actually ordered their book, but there is some good information out there if you hunt for it. And then when you're on the ground, it may help you to put 2 and 2 together, because really that's what you're doing, is building a puzzle with some of the pieces missing. So you need to try to, how do the pieces fit together here?
Pat, or Rick rather, I think that, yeah, we're going to be putting, you got video.
I got some video this week, Patrick, that we did up here on a drainage just this past week. And it's just short and sweet, but I will have a little bit of a commentary on it of what we did and why.
Short and sweet, huh? That's going to be much more fun to edit.
You're right. Yeah. It's going to be, this one's going to be easy after that last one. But
that was something. Right?
It'll be just on the fact we wanted to go into this drainage and make sure, first of all, is there gold? Because before we start mobilizing big equipment that costs a lot of money to move, we wanted that information firsthand, that yes, there's gold. And we got that. We got a yes answer in what we did this week. So now we'll do a little bit of more planning for how we're actually going to go in and do a bigger testing program. Next spring will probably be a 1 or 2 month testing program before we can actually mine it, you know, to make sure that there's the, you know, commercial values there. Montana has a field notebook. I think you had one of these too, didn't you? And that's a geologic field notebook with areas that
that's the one with all the geologic.
Yeah, it gives the smaller geologic maps there. It's not quite as defined, but it gives you a little bit tighter area as far as, you know, within a certain part of a county or whatever. That's a really good field notebook to have in the truck with your stuff when you're looking for certain kinds of rock or whatever. And a lot of this research has been around a long time, but you do have to go hunt it a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of old records, Chris. USGS really has a lot of records from different areas. I mean, like here in Montana, the Bureau of Mines at the time, the U.S. Bureau of Mines, kept records when they did any drilling here, looking for places they could run dredges and that. All of those records are at the Bureau of Mines. You can go find the drill records. So maybe they never actually even mined the drainage, or they never ran a dredge in the drainage or anything, but they did test it. Somebody went in there and did testing, and they kept those records, because if it would have been viable for a dredge or a big mining operation, those records were their indicator to go there. And if it wasn't good enough for what they wanted, those records, the government was getting those records, because, you know, back in those days, the biggest buyer of gold specifically, some of it was garnet and lead and whatever all they could buy, but your biggest buyer of gold was the U.S. Treasury. And in some cases during the 30s and that, it was the only one you could even sell your gold to. There was no gold buyers. So there is records. How accurate those records really are, they're probably, you know, hinged a little bit depending on what the payoff was to the Treasury agent who was on the dredge. You know, if they were paying off the Treasury agent, the dredge records and what they reported the recovery at may only be 50% of what the dredge actually recovered. We've kind of ran into that situation in some stuff that the dredge records don't make sense. And it's like, well, the U.S. government had a Treasury agent on the dredge that was probably well taken care of, let's say.
No. Corruption in government? Say it isn't so.
course it isn't so.
So there is, a lot of things you can archive on any given area where you are in the United, whether you're in South Carolina or North Carolina or Georgia or Montana, there's a lot of things that you can go to look for information and try to get as much historic value information as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they had silver certificates and gold certificates up till around the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell, you still, like here in Montana, you still seen silver dollars in constant use here until in the 80s. It was amazing that people would, you give them a $5 bill for something and they'd hand you back a bunch of silver dollars.
And you didn't keep them, did you?
No, I kept some, but not near enough. But, it's kind of interesting that. But some of the mines here actually were paying their labor out back in the 70s, especially. They'd pay their labor in silver dollars if that's what they wanted. So it was kind of interesting when you go back and look at things that were happening not that long ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh. Pretty much, Jeff.
Yeah. They're working on making sure they pretty much screw you to death the way it's looking.
Joke of the day. What's an honest politician? Answer, one who stays bought.
Yeah. Pretty much. Pretty much. I just thought I'd go over that with as far as, research subjects and trying to source as much information as you can. It can really help you in your hunt. Whether you're hunting a specific type of mine or just in a regional area, that the more you know about it before you ever go boots on the ground can really, really help you.
Here's another little change of subject situation I ran into this week. Where I'm retimbering that decline.
Mm-hmm.
I had one 4x6 portion left over that's about 5 feet, and I had a 5-foot 4x4 post. And I was like, I'm not even sure 5 feet's going to be enough with the increase in angle and this and that. So the boss said, well, just get a 12-foot 4x6 and cut it in half,
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the store to get one. And they didn't have one. They had a 10-foot 4x6 pressure treated. But they did have 4x4 pressure treated for about half the cost. So what I did was I bought two 12-foot 4x4s, cut them in half, and I'm going to screw them together into two 4x8 posts that I can use. And if it turns out I only need one because the 5-foot will be adequate, then I've got two claim corner posts.
Wise use.
But you can screw timbers together, folks. Sometimes that's a useful way of doing things.
As long as they're stable on the footing and you're tight on your cap.
Yeah.
It really, your pressure, if everything's done right, your pressure's direct.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you don't want it bending and pushing sideways. But, yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Patrick. There's some question notes in there.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I am perfect.
No, we'll go into, I think next Monday night, I'll try to do something on, kind of hitting the ground and what I do once I get on the ground. Because that becomes another important clue as to what you're looking at when and like I say, I'll get into it on Monday night, but there's a lot of clues that'll tell you kind of about what they did and how they did it. And maybe an area is like, oh, they probably worked this pretty hard based on a couple of things.
Yeah, luckily this isn't real high stress stuff, Chris, but the boss seems to like PT as opposed to just like redwood, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. The fir, you get some good solid fir timbers though, and they'll last in these mines for a long, long
In your
time.
experience, what's the best wood for timbering?
The fir.
Fir? Douglas fir?
Yep.
Okay.
Doug fir.
Here. So there's the answer for
If you
Montana.
take these lodge poles, which make really easy posts because a lot of them are just about the right size, but
For stoles?
the lodge pole will, with moisture in that, they'll rot out fairly fast, or within 10 years they deteriorate so bad that it's not good.
Okay.
Where the fir, some of this fir, you go in these old mines, I mean, you take your rock pick and drive into the post, and them posts they look like crap on the outside, like almost like they're burnt or black, but you drive into them and you peel them up and they're nice and red inside.
How about redwood?
I would think redwood would be very long too, because it's got a natural oil that's resistant to just about anything. But the cost of redwood is so prohibitive.
Well,
it's light.
It ain't cheap either.
No, that's true. But I think I would go to just good fir.
Fir? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up to the boss.
Well, another thing they used here, a lot of them would use the lodge pole because they're they're just about like fence posts already, a lot of them. And it makes easy, quick posts. But what a lot of the old guys used to do is kind of char them to dry the outside of them. They'd peel the bark enough that the post can breathe, and they would char them a little bit. And if they were charred, they last a long time. Chris says don't use redwood. Yeah, well. But I guess my experience has been that I looked at a mine a few years back that was timbered in 1988. They re-timbered the whole air shaft and all the landings, and it was all brand new in 1988. And when we were in there, there is no way in hell I would have climbed in and up that air shaft or nothing. It was that deteriorated already, just in less than a 20-year period of time. It was literally coming apart. And if that would have been fir, that would have been solid to this day. Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, a lot of them that were, if they were done in Doug fir, some of those are just as solid as can be, unless you had a real bad water issue or, something. Well, like here we've had earthquakes and things. There's always little things that could break things down, but.
Yeah, but that's just pure physical stress.
I mean, I look at some of these guys that are going into these mines, in Arizona and that, looking at the timbering, and man, it looks like some of that looks like it's brand new yet, and it was put in there, in the 1880s, 1890s or whatever, and it's like, wow.
Do you know what your timbers are, Lars?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. My knowledge of wood in itself is fairly limited.
Some of that pressure treated is just pine. It could even be some spruce. You never know unless you're really paying attention.
I wouldn't know. I couldn't tell by looking at it. No, I could pay attention all I want. I don't know what to look for.
Most of it's fine.
Yeah. See, luckily, I'm not doing much in the way of strain. I mean, I'm literally, like 3 feet underground.
Yeah.
Just holding up debris, so it's not too bad. I'm a big fan of steel.
Exactly, Chris. A lot of it's made with a lot younger trees nowadays. If it was heartwood out of some old growth trees or something, it's much, much more solid wood than when it's a tree that was barely bigger than the post.
How about railroad ties? how good are they?
I would,
They would tend to burn pretty bad, I would think.
Yeah, you've got the creosote and
yeah.
And not only that, you start cutting railroad ties with a chainsaw or something, I'll tell you what, it dulls your blades and stuff so freaking bad. You can't, it's just a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you got rock and soil embedded in the coating.
Well, this video I did, Jeff, you'll see that I had to cut a road open up there for about a mile to get into that drainage. And the people that owned the land said that road hadn't been open for 12 years. You got to see how much timber I cut off that. It took us over a day just to cut that 1 mile of road out with 2 guys and chainsaws and the mini excavator with the thumb on it, setting the logs to this. I got enough firewood now for 5 years just on that road, I think.
Interesting, Chris.
Yeah. Well, creosote, can be reactive. That was one of the main things about using it. It was dangerous as hell. It's like linseed oil. It can just self-explode under the right temperature and volatility. Yeah, you could sit up here and listen at night on a windy night, listen to the forest falling down. It's pretty unsafe if it's a windy day.
Well, if we ever need a bunch of stoles, I'll talk to you.
Yeah, we can get some sod, or we can go do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because
you know where all the down trees are.
Well, and that's what we did up there on that one mine I was rebuilding a few years ago. I just went and sawed all my own timbers. Yeah, a barrel kind of keep you on your toes, looking left and right and behind you. And
so far, we haven't seen anything at Montana Bee except for deer.
Well, it's the environment you're in. You're not in a wooded, real heavy, dense, brushy, wooded,
Nope.
The bears tend to like the drainages where there's water and lots of things to pick from. And the hillsides along those where, and unfortunately where I'm at, we're in prime bear type country.
An orange tint, huh?
Yeah.
I suppose it could.
Yeah, they got different phases, just like a black bear.
A ginger bear.
Yeah, a ginger bear.
Oh my goodness. Anyhow.
Yeah, they'll keep you. They'll keep you on your toes after you see one. You're pretty awake after that. Yeah, cinnamon colored. Yeah.
Cool, Tricky. Let us know how it works.
That'd be quite interesting, Tricky, to hear what your tests and how it works out. That's really what this whole forum is about, is all of us kind of learning as we go as much as we can, and hope we can pass on knowledge to you guys as well.
We come up with something that works other places and works simple enough
that
it's easy to do. Oh, got the hickey-ups.
Yeah, it's... Any other questions, guys? Or
yeah, I should have those numbers, before next live stream. Dropped them off at the lab today. It's kind of frustrating. And go to the lab and drop them. I said, when are they going to run them? It's like, sometime this week. Last time they told me that on a Monday, they had the results on Tuesday. It's like, any better ideas than that?
Well, that's what makes this kind of unique, Jeff, is we can all discuss certain things. You're mining, and a bunch of these guys on here are miners and doing mining. And it's actually kind of interesting because we're in quite a few different countries here even, and it's not just, the local area. And I just find that pretty neat.
Yeah, that is kind of cool.
We got Tricky down there in the Philippines. He's on here with us. And it's pretty neat that different. We're all trying different things to be, economic.
Yeah, Jeff, I saw a phrase today. Somebody said, "Don't be so open-minded, your brain falls out." Where's everybody from? I don't know. We got several from Montana here.
Yeah.
Chris is from Forest Hill, California, up there near the Donner Pass area. Lars is from the Los Angeles area.
Yeah, Jeff's in Florida right now.
Yeah, Stephen B's from Canuckistan up there in Canada. Yep. I think was Argonaut from Canada also.
I'm not sure about that. Goldstream's from Canada. If he's on tonight, I guess I didn't see.
him.
Jeff's there from Idaho, Manhattan, Kansas, Nova Scotia. Patrick's in Alcatraz.
Yeah, pretty much.
Australia.
Alcatraz. Yeah. Coulter from Mining Magnets. He's from the Boise area.
I believe
basically.
Muhammad there was in Australia too, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe we had Muhammad.
If he's here yet,
I don't recall seeing him today.
He was here earlier.
Okay.
Made some comments about the placers, the testing, I guess, when we were talking about testing. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that we got, some really neat.
I'm not sure when the next election is. But yeah, it's this whole situation is just so bizarre. It's hard to describe, and it's not allowed to be described on YouTube, which is
unfortunately
kind of interesting. But that guy's Sanity for Sweden, it is so funny because they gave him a strike, and so now he's sitting there doing something. I want to remind everyone, this is a YouTube video where we never disagree with the authorities and such, and blah, blah, blah. And he says, and as a public service, there are people that are they disagree with the authorities, and you should never listen to them. So here's one. Here's another. Now remember, never ever look at anything from these people. And today he was doing it. He's from Sweden, of course, and he says, in Norway, the death rate has gone up, and they don't know why, and blah blah blah. And if someone was crazy, they might blame it on the vaccine, but you have to be crazy to do that. And it's just so fun to see how he's playing the game. It's like it's just hilarious. They do not understand. You can't really suppress stuff without. It's called the Streisand effect. I don't know if you've heard of it. What was that? That it was something.
She started complaining because somebody had posted aerial photos of her house online and it violated her privacy.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, the photos that nobody had seen before suddenly went viral and were seen by tens of millions.
Oh
of
yeah,
people.
well that's what happens. The reverse effect.
Yeah, because as soon as you start making an issue of something, then everyone's like, "Well, what are they making an issue of?"
We've seen it with the new slogan going around. It took off pretty fast.
So my shirt's on the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny. It is hilarious. Information is very hard to control. Now, quite often what they do is they try and confuse the issue.
Oh yeah, twist it somehow.
Or they'll have people come out there and say this or that, and when you dig down into it later, you find out, well, these were actually plants. They didn't.
Yeah, put somebody.
They had no faith to do this,
crazy question,
but purely just to throw out something weird to confuse the issue.
Spin it. Yep,
and
really.
I say they just don't understand. You can kind of control the narrative for a while, but you can't keep it forever.
No.
And it's that what was it, P.T. Barnum? You can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I'd say there are people who really want to be convinced of things, that are not going to look for counter examples and such,
Right. Question.
which makes it.
And in mining, you have to question everything you're doing.
And everyone you're talking to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you hear a story of the old timer up here did, whatever, well, there's probably a hint of truth in there, and maybe some of it's true.
It may be completely true.
And a lot of it's probably bullshit, but you have to try to kind of filter out what's, and question it, because you may find out that what they're telling you is actually there's a level of truth there. And now you'll all of a sudden understand that, holy crap, this is what this guy found, this kind of stuff right here.
Yeah. And another thing, when you're trying to ascertain how reliable information is, there's a couple of things you look for contradictions.
Right.
And you try and find the motivation. And sometimes you find that in a secondary thing. You see that some guy really likes to build himself up or whatever. And you're like, well, if this guy's bullshitting me about this, then he might very well be bullshitting me about that.
Right. You really start questioning the answers then.
Another thing that a guy, I was out on a prospecting trip several days in Mexico with this guy, and he was saying it never fails to amaze me how I'll be talking business with this guy or that, and he's bragging about how he's cheating on his wife and this and that and the other. And he says, so let's see if I got this right. You're cheating on the person that you promised to never lie to, and who's supposedly the most important to your life. And then you expect me to believe you?
Yeah, right. I'm going to believe you. Now I'm really I'm on.
And so when somebody does something that indicates their sincerity, their honesty, their accuracy, especially when it was something that sounded pretty, shaky to begin with,
right?
Then I, increase the confidence level in that source.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or, if you can prove it again, like we were saying, you take a sample. Well, okay, there's a chance that just happened to be a good spot. Take another sample. Can you reproduce what happened? Mm-hmm. If you start to reproduce what happened in your recovery or whatever, now you got something.
Well, especially when you do it independently.
Yeah, especially if you're right there doing it, or you're, being able to reproduce that, then you got something.
Yeah.
Jeff, that's normal. 1/2 ounce of gold as a cutoff for most of anybody that's on here would be probably pretty realistic. I mean, anything below that, by the time you start putting it, I mean, if you're doing enough tonnage, you may be able to float under that on some rock, like in a hard rock situation or something. You may be able to float down, under that 1/2 ounce. You may be able to get down economically to, closer to 1/4 or 3/8 of an ounce. But
if it was a dump, that wouldn't be too
well,
hard.
right. Something that's easy to get the rock out, easy to process. It could be economic, but in most cases, you're going to, definitely want a free milling gold that's 1/2 ounce to the ton or better, or possibly maybe some other elements that can be taken out, in a flotation system or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got to have
a co-product. Yeah.
Yeah, if you got a co-product or some other form of, it's maybe occasional specimens that can bring bigger money.
Mm-hmm.
It could make the mine economic at a lower level, but to really get economic in a free mill situation, you really are looking at close to that 1/2 ounce and better. By the time you look, at permitting and all the crap that goes into this, and the amount of work it took to find that mine in the beginning, how many years did you wander the wilderness, And that's something that people forget. They forgot they spent 3 years trying to figure it out before they got to all of a sudden, everybody else is saying, man, he got lucky. No, it ain't about luck. There is no luck. It's about doing your homework and figuring it out and being able to get onto a spot that finally the pieces come together.
Well,
and this is what I've seen as I've learned in my travels through this, mining thing, is now when I look at something, I remember back to somewhere in the beginning to go, you know what? I got to go back and look at that drainage, because now I realize enough that what I was looking at wasn't what I thought. You know, so and that's one reason for the field notebook is when you're looking at something, maybe it doesn't make sense right now, but 3 years from now, it may make sense to you. And, you know, it's one of them deals where you kind of wake up in the middle of the night and go, holy shit, you know, we overlooked something there. And that happens quite often. The more you learn and the more you tie things together, you see where you may have made a mistake or you second guess something.
You bet, Tricky.
Thanks for being here, Tricky. Yeah, keep us in the loop.
Good night, Tricky.
Yeah, I'll say I'm hopeful we can come up with a simple smelting process for that resin.
That'll be really cool.
Tricky had a pretty good report today. What are the new mines for this year? We're planning on my end to basically continue on Montana B. I think the boss has one other claim that he wants to do somewhere in that general direction. And that whole area around Montana B has some interesting other little mines and stuff we want to check out. So I think that's going to be, I'm going to be pretty busy all next season just on that area there, unless something pops up. I mean, obviously, if somebody shows up with 10 ounce to the ton free milling gold,
gonna go look at
it's like,
it.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
perhaps we need to adjust.
Yeah, you gotta go look at it, or you may find another mine if you keep. You're always looking. And take a sample and see what happens. I walked on an area up there elk hunting the second weekend of elk hunting. I was in an area that I really have never walked. It was not near any of my claims. It was a kind of a new area. I've hunted it before, but never was really paying much attention to the ground. And I walked by some rock and I started looking at it and I turned and looked this way and that way. And I'm like, holy crap. Here's something that nobody found, because then later on, I circled down the mountain a ways and come back up looking to see if there was like a test hole or anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And I'm like, they never found it. But 140 years ago, what I seen maybe was still covered with just enough topsoil or something. It never got noticed.
Brushed.
So right away, I pull out a bag. I always carry a sample bag in my backpack, and I grabbed a whole handful of random samples there, and I've got to work through that, but it looked quite interesting. All of a sudden, it's like maybe this is a gold area that was not found. So that's my next assays, is to do a little bit of crushing and panning myself, and then send part off for an assay and see what comes back.
I got an RC46.
Yeah, well, I didn't take, I only took about a 5 pound, 6 pound sample and one big rock. I was close enough to the truck. I thought, the hell with it. I'm taking one big chunk with me. I'll head for the truck.
Yeah.
But, I had an old friend that was telling me his dad was a geologist actually in this area years and years ago. And he said, hell, Dad elk hunted with a rock pick on his side. And I'm like, so is he elk hunting or hunting rocks? And he said, well, that was questionable. He said he kind of get preoccupied sometimes somewhere on a rock pile, breaking rocks and looking.
Yeah, it can happen. Absolutely. Are we going to have a Christmas party? No plans yet. Somebody wants to arrange one, and it's close by. We could probably show up. Oh, well,
yeah, it's
this week I'll have a much better idea how much we can load that resin to, and when it starts losing efficiency.
That'll be interesting.
I should have a fair amount of it. And the thing is, if I don't know, that means it's really loading high, because it's not tapering off yet. And so I'll either have some good information or I'll have some really good indications.
Yeah, okay, we're doing it wrong.
And while you're no, Chris, elks are too smart to do that. You need to be just examining the rocks carefully and quietly. Yeah. I had a friend once. He said he was out there on a little ledge, a little cliff. He was sitting on top of this deer hunting, and he said he felt something kind of brush his arm, and he felt it again. He turns around, and there's this bear looking at him like, what is this bush that smells like a deer? You know, because he was all camoed out and he had his scent on and everything. He says, I couldn't run, but that bear sure could. He took off.
What the hell?
This guy got nowhere to go. You know, there's a cliff behind him.
A friend of mine was running his sawmill over here one day, just a small mill, milling some logs, and he had his 2 black labs right there with him. Black labs are laying under the truck sleeping, and he had the dogs for bear. Dogs are laying under the truck sleeping right there, and he's got the engine running on the sawmill and that, and he's sawing, and something bumps him, and he turns around. He thought it was the black lab. He turned around to kick him or something, get him away from him. And here it's a black bear, and he said his nose was right up against his wallet. And he's like, holy shit, it's a good thing he didn't try to just bite me or something. But he said, hell, I cleared the side over the mill, and he's like, what? And he's yelling for the dogs, and he said, hell, they're laying under the truck sleeping.
Excuse me.
Middle of the day.
A, I'm sleeping. B, it's bigger than me.
It's a bear.
So I'm going to at least pretend I'm sleeping for now. Okay, got it? Now, that guy I was telling you about that, he also used to go out. There's a place called Fort Wingate in New Mexico. It's a big ammunition depot. Mm-hmm. That's basically all it is. Just big area of the desert that had bunker after bunker after bunker after bunker, and just square mile after square mile. And he said, there's lots of deer out there. Because come deer season, they all go out on the restricted area. And the fence didn't go all the way around it. You know, when you go up in the mountains and work your way down through some trails and stuff, you can wind up and get on it. And he said he and his buddy were out there on Fort Wingate poaching deer. And he said,
it's always a good thing.
And then he had his gun and, you know, rifle in the car, and there was a bump or something, and it went off and just drilled the transmission and turned that Jeep into a paperweight.
Yep. Boat anchor.
In the middle of a restricted area. And he says, what can you do? You can't move it.
No.
You know, it's got a license plate. It's got serial numbers. So they just basically had to pay the fines and stuff.
Ouch.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that would be pretty embarrassing. It's like, oh, crap. What do we do now?
Yeah. Kind of hang yourself with your own rope there.
Yeah, you pretty much just got to face the music and hope they don't get too serious. Call yourself Antifa.
I drove across the Canadian border up in North Dakota hunting on a prairie trail, and I had 2 pistols laying on the dash and my rifles, everything's loaded. And I look in the rear view mirror, I was just bouncing down the prairie trail, and here come Border Patrol. And I was like, oh shit. And he's put the lights on, and he said, you know where you're at? And I'm like, I kind of think I do now. And he started laughing. He said, turn around. I'm following you back. You're about a mile across into Canada right here, buddy. And he never said a word about all the handguns and the crap in the truck. So thank God I got off easy. Was he a
Canuck-Stani?
Yeah, it was a Canuck. Yeah.
That's good.
And I thought, oh shit, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in Canada.
It could be worse.
But there's a lot there at that time. There was no distinction up there on the border. You know, a lot of them farmers farmed both sides of the border. So the prairie trails just went on and on over the hill.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there was something funny.
Now they got big concrete barriers on all of them, and they tore the roads out and everything else. But
there was something funny that happened in Boston this weekend. You had a demonstration from, what was it, Happy Merry Fun America or whatever.
Yeah, something along those lines.
They got a name like Happy Merry Fun America. It's an organization that it's basically kind of a political protest organization where they protest all this progressive crap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so they were going to have a protest of the mandates and such. So Antifa showed up. So you have the anti-fascists attacking the people who are trying to get the less government control. It was so funny because Hey, Chain Manska. It was so funny because Tim Pool was going like, so the anti-fascist, were attacked by the Antifa fascists. And he managed to get
like, how
fascist in there about 6 times in one
How
sentence.
complicated can it get?
It was pretty hilarious. It's like, so let's see, I get this. The anti-fascists are now trying to help the government force people to do something that makes big business money, and they call themselves anti-fascists. Reminded me of The Princess Bride, where the guy's saying like, I do not think the word means what you think it means. Hey, Jane, we're kind of winding it up here. Do you have any questions or anything?
Yeah, we kind of
run out.
We got a few subjects in tonight, so it wasn't all bad.
But to quick recap, been spending my time at the mill this week, basically. Eva's been a little bit under the weather. She's feeling better now. But been basically leaching ore and loading resin. And Jim went out and did some placer sampling this week and got some videos. So we should have a video up on that later this week.
Yep.
And hopefully I will be going out to the mine again this week and getting that timbering done. So that's basically what's going on. Still haven't even started trying to get the gold out of the resin because I'm racing the winter here.
Yeah, do everything you can outside before you can go play with that.
And we'll see what fun solutions we can get to that.
I started fixing your road going up there to the ranch. I suppose you've seen that. I took the.
Was you the guy on the grader?
Yeah, I was running the grader up there the other day.
Whose property is that? Where you were just
that's a county road. There's a 66-foot right of way up that county road. I ripped that whole corner out.
Yeah, I saw that.
Bring that road down. I'm going to go up and do some more tomorrow. We're going farther up.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm going like, okay, this guy was not dressing the road here.
No, I was pulling that shoulder and filling that big ditch along.
So that's you that did that.
Yeah,
huh?
No, I'm not done yet, but we need some moisture. I actually talked to the fire department. They're going to go up there and run some water for me on it.
Yeah,
the guys called me. They had an old Model 12 knuckle buster grader, and nobody knew how to run it. And I'm like, well, I do. I can run it. And they're like, you can? And I'm like, yeah. So they're like, well, can you come up here? Because we need somebody who can run it. I'm like, sure.
They're not that hard.
No, not really. But these guys were all just a little put off by, the minute they push one and it kicks back at you.
Yeah, you got to drive it in there. You don't go gentle with it.
You got to be, but you want to be sweet with it too. You don't want it under a whole bunch of pressure when you try to do it, because if you're really under a big load, it'll break your wrist. Yeah. So I started laughing. I'm like, hell yeah, I can run it. So I ran some of that road down there. Some of it turned out really nice. But then he's like, can you tear that out of there and fill that big ditch? And I'm like, well, yeah.
It's a grader.
Yeah, I can build a road with that thing.
Yeah.
So I got to run road grader that. I haven't done that for quite a while, but I used to have an old Cat 12 just like that. So I had a lot of hours on one.
I probably ran it one like that a little bit in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And
the thing was built in about 1948 or 50.
We had one at Picacho. When I left Picacho, then I was on a 14G hydraulic, Yeah. But yeah, does that 12, does that have a pony motor start?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They've got this one bypass with an electric motor start, though. They put a starter on it.
Yeah, ours had the pony
motor. But the pony motor's still there, and it looks like the pony motor's actually in pretty good shape. But the guy who owns the grader had never even ran it. He's like, I don't know how to run that thing. And I'm like, well, maybe I need to show you how to run it, so at least if you're going to own it, you know how to drive it.
For those of you who don't know, the old diesel engines were not nearly as easy to start as the new ones.
No.
And so they had all kinds of unusual starting systems. A pony motor is a small, is that a gas engine?
Two-cylinder gas engine.
Yeah.
And it's water cooled.
Yeah, and that's your starting motor.
And you got about a quart of gasoline for the gas tank. You fill it up, and you can pull a decompression release and disengage the big engine away from it.
Yeah, you clutch it out.
And you clutch it out, and you start the pony motor and let it warm up, and it heats the coolant, so it'll warm up the big engine, and then you can start to spin over the big engine and let it get really moving good. It's a big 6-cylinder cat. It basically was the same on the D6s, D7 dozers. And then once you've got the big engine warmed up, you can drop the compression release to put the 800 PSI back on the diesel, and it'll kick on the diesel fuel and fire up the big engine. And then you can shut the pony motor off.
Yep.
And disengage it.
Now we had over at Pikachu, we also had a TD15 gas over diesel.
Yep. I had a TD18 at home years ago, cable dozer.
Yeah.
And that was, same thing. That was a 6-cylinder engine that you decompressed it.
Yep.
And one side of the engine had a gas engine intake on it, intake and carburetor. And the other side of the engine, and spark plugs. And the other side of the engine on the cylinders had the injectors. So you'd start it on gasoline on low compression, warm it all up good, and then you'd trip it over. You have to trip the levers over to fire it on the diesel. And if it didn't fire, you'd have to decompress it quick and run it up a little more on the gas engine throttle. And then you'd trip it again, and you get the diesel to crank up. And then when you went to full diesel, it shut the gasoline off and shut that intake manifold off on the opposite side of the engine. It was a pretty cool design.
Yeah.
And they had those on farm tractors all the way down to the MD6, I think, or something like that. In the international farm tractors, they had that same system down to like a 50-horse farm tractor at one time.
Yeah, I mean, it's back now. You probably know, I don't know, but I mean, they just didn't have the kind of compression ratios they do nowadays. Why couldn't they start the diesels like they do now?
They didn't have starters that would turn them over.
Okay.
Because the compression ratio, like on that cat, that 12 there, that 12 grader, that compression ratio is like 800 PSI.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 6 of those cylinders, and they're pretty big pistons in there.
Yeah.
You know, they're 6 inches across or something. You couldn't, electric motor in those days, they only had like 6 and 8 volt in the 1940s. They didn't have anything powerful enough to turn that thing over to really get it to fire.
Spin it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and if you go back to older tractors, like even in some of the British tractors and that, they actually, on the one, I can't even think of the name, the Major, I think, they actually used a shotgun shell to fire it. They'd hand spin the engine and hit the shotgun shell with a hammer to fire the diesel up. I mean, they created some crazy crap back when they had like distillate and mixed fuels that weren't that good of fuel. They had some crazy ways of firing stuff up because they didn't have electric motors that would turn it enough
under those
compression ratios.
Okay. Yeah, I figured it was something like that because back in the late 80s, that pretty much, I mean, even glow plugs pretty much went out.
Yep.
You know, they just get in and fire it up.
Yeah, a lot of them even went to just the glow plug, like in the Cummins diesels and a lot of that. The glow plug is really just an air intake heater. It's right in the manifold, and the air goes through that heater.
Yeah,
and it shoves warm air into the cylinder to pop it.
And gets it higher temperature.
Higher temperature, faster. But it's pretty neat how they, the engineering and the ingenuity of people is just remarkable.
The engineering.
Yeah,
ingenuity
and engineering.
Yeah,
that backyard mechanics. Some of them guys are pretty brilliant in how they created something.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, nowadays,
even some of these mines, these guys, when you look at some of the crap they built, it's just like, well, how long did it take to build that? You know, it's pretty interesting what these guys were capable of with just some simple hand tools.
Well, my brother was just telling me that they've got trucks like up to almost 400 tons now. And the problem is they can't turn them at the dump because it'll damage the tires, twisting it that
trying
much
to get it to
heats
turn.
them. So they pull up at the dump and just dump behind them, and a dozer pushes it off. And then they can turn away
empty.
empty,
Right, they don't
and
have
it doesn't
the
heat
weight
the
on the
tires.
steering axle. Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, and say so they're really pushing materials now. My brother has a theory that once they get the autonomous driving going better,
Yeah.
then it might make more sense to run smaller equipment because everything is easier in a smaller size.
Right.
But of course, your operator, each unit still requires an operator. Now that's a pretty big cost.
Right.
If you eliminate that, then you can make a
6 little units versus one
Yeah.
big one. No, they're looking at that in the farming too, in agriculture. With the autonomous that they're working on, it's smaller tractors instead of bigger.
Mhm.
And it's that same thing. If you could take the labor factor out, you can put 2 units or 3 units out there cheaper than one big one.
Yeah.
And easier to build, easier to maintain. If one goes out of service for repairs or service, just normal service, it doesn't affect the other string.
Mhm.
Where with your big equipment, if you take one big truck out of a
no
circuit,
redundancy.
there's not enough redundancy to keep the whole thing operating like you were when everything was running correctly.
Well, another thing my brother thought, if you have autonomous vehicles, they can rearrange how they drive to a certain extent by computer. Says, so why turn it?
Right.
Just
dump and go.
he
dump.
pulls
Yeah.
noses into the dump, they fill it, and then it drives off with a tailgate pointing towards the dump.
Right. It can run backwards.
You just go right to the dump, park, dump. And then take off this way.
Right. It doesn't have to change direction.
Yeah, because the steering would, of course, be pretty funky if you were essentially in reverse.
Right.
But the computer can handle it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, we had, basically, GPS computer controlled tractors back when I was still doing some of the, farm work and that. And it was amazing how accurate
Mm-hmm.
you could get that dialed in to where at one point I was running a 600 horse tractor with the 72-foot field cultivator. And I could dial that field cultivator into from one pass to the next within probably less than a half an inch,
Mm-hmm.
just by sitting there playing with the numbers on the computer in the tractor. And it was auto steer. You didn't have to steer it or nothing.
Yep.
It's all controlled, GPS controlled in that. And you could so you got a 72-foot field cultivator, you're taking a 72-foot swath, turning around and pushing the button again and putting it on the next track. And it's within, fractions of an inch. And it was impressive.
Yeah. Well, Randy was working.
I used to sit and fine tune. I didn't have anything else to do. You're not driving it.
Turn on the stereo, man.
I would keep pushing and readjusting the numbers to see how close I could get to leave one blade of grass somewhere or something. It was just like, wow, this is pretty crazy.
Yeah, he was saying
The accuracy is just amazing.
they were using all computer controlled dozers and stuff up there. They were building a new pad, basically. And he says it's so funny because the operators don't know what the fuck they're doing anymore.
No, they're just there.
Randy's like, yeah, I can do that. I don't need to program the dozer to do that. I can just do that,
Right. But,
And they're like, wow, how's that? It's like, computer?
well, yeah. Yeah, you do. Well, you do have to have experience to do.
Exactly.
When you're sitting in a loader or something, if you've got experience, you can tell when you're not cutting straight or you're starting to go up or starting to go down.
And that bubble level up your ass tells you.
Yeah, you can feel the differences. The road grader is really critical to that. When you're in a road grader, you can tell with your ass which way you're leaning a little bit, but you have to run that equipment long enough that you have that feel.
And the road grader,
them old guys, I seen old guys, man. I tell you what, they ran, had put so many thousands of hours in. They were so good at what they were doing. I mean, they could whisper that blade across something and not really touch it, but they could get that close and never slow down.
Yeah.
They just knew where they were. They just tapped that thing and just sail on by. And it's like, How the hell do you do that?
It's not just experience though. There's also a touch.
You have to have the feel.
There's a certain
not everybody
natural
has
talent.
that.
Yeah, I see. I don't.
Yeah.
I have the
Drive with your butt, people.
yeah.
Well-
I have the brain to understand what the machine's trying to do. I don't have the reflexes and the nuanced sensation to do the very rapid, small corrections needed to make it do it smoothly.
You know, you want that little swale or
With
that
a grader, I can do it pretty well because the grader does all that automatically.
Yeah.
On the grader, you're basically trying to tell it in general what you want to do. What's the average cut? Which way do you want
you know,
to go? Do you want to keep going straight or do you want to start dipping this
Right.
way or start dipping that way? And so the grader, I could do that. And I was a good instructor because, again, I know the geometry of what the machine's doing. And I would spend at least a half an hour with a newbie explaining how this machine works geometrically.
Mhm.
Like with a dozer, if you make a divot
Oh man.
with that blade, if you make a 6-inch bump, when your track hits the 6-inch bump,
You start to
the blade goes up a foot.
right. You gain. You're right. You double everything you do wrong. It starts doubling on you.
Exactly. And so you've got to either A, never screw up, or B, be ready to counter it when you hit it with the front of the track.
Yeah.
And explain it. With a loader, you got to change that rake angle on the bucket. Do you want to dive? Well, then you don't push down hard.
Best flavor.
You tip those teeth down a little bit.
Yep.
You know? And say,
I was teaching my son and a friend of his how to load gravel in the pit and not keep digging a hole because they kept either that or they'd run in on the bucket and hit the pile and then you go up the pile. And I'm like, no, you stop, set your bucket until you know you're flat and then go. And don't be playing with the damn lever. Just go into the pile and then work up out of it so you're not rolling on the damn hydraulics either so much.
yeah, you're
And
not
pretty
rubbing the
soon-
bottom of the bucket.
Right,
as
but
bad.
you know, they'd always start and then pretty soon they're digging a deeper hole
Yeah.
in their tracks. Well, you spin your wheels, so now you got a divot and you keep
Now it
it
bumps.
right, it
Yeah.
keeps getting worse. And I'm like, okay, then once in a while go in there with your cutting edge and back drag yourself flat.
Either
again.
that or take a partial scoop, dump
Dump
it
it
ahead,
in, yep,
and then flat bucket forward.
right, grade it in again.
You know?
And once they learned it, it took a while, but once they learned how to operate, then it's like, oh, this isn't so hard. But at first, you overcomplicate things in your head, first of all. So you got to get past that. I put my son on the dozer one time. He thought that looked easy. Well, I can dozer without ever slowing down.
Yeah.
I can cut and fill and fill in stuff and blade over it and just blow it right out. And he's like, well, that looks pretty easy.
Sure it does.
Sure it doesn't, but get on it and then do it. Well, he was so frustrated. He started getting them humps and dives and it just got worse and worse. And
like it would with me.
it's like the washboards on a gravel road. Once one starts, they just keep multiplying down the road.
Absolutely.
Well, that's exactly what a dozer does. Is once you start, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and it's a hell of a ride.
Yeah.
And we were laughing, and he's like, "It isn't funny." He said, "How do you do that?" And I'm like, "You got to keep dirt in front of your blade.
Yeah.
You can't be
you
adjusting.
can't level air.
You can't be constantly playing with the levers. You have to start level or start flat and try to maintain that. And if you get off, you got to fix it right away and back up and get flat again and start again."
Well, actually,
Yeah, good for a dirt bike track. Yeah, Chris.
Question.
what?
What makes washboards?
It's the harmonic frequency of the tires.
Speed is a big thing because once a tire spins, and when you look at a gravel road, a lot of them are, it's partially the lack of maintenance basically due to the amount of traffic and speed it's getting. If it's maintained correctly in the right time frame and compacted or whatever,
Yeah.
it'll last a lot longer based on, but what happens is you get the road really packed and nice, and then everybody drives faster on it,
Mhm.
which immediately starts tearing it up again.
So if everybody drove slow, there would never be washboards.
Not really.
Yeah.
You might get a little divot, but you wouldn't really get that effect of washboards because once they start, it just keeps carrying.
But everyone have to go 10 miles an hour. Nobody's
Well,
gonna do
right.
that if
No,
they can
no,
avoid
they
it.
no,
Yeah.
they just go faster and faster.
Yeah, the
Yeah, Stephen, you got it.
4 inches plus or minus. Yeah, Jeff. Well, if you'd look, you notice this eye isn't pointing towards the other one. I don't have binocular vision. I'm basically seeing like this. And so I can't even see with that kind of precision. But that's where a grader, first of all, it doesn't react suddenly, and it's always trying to correct for you. You just have to make sure you get it in the right range.
Yeah.
Because the geometry is such that, well, if you hit a 6-inch rock with your left front tire, how much does the blade move?
6 inches? Well, about 12.
No, on a grader.
Oh, the front wheel on a grader doesn't really make a whole big difference, actually.
1.5 inches.
Yeah, it's not so damn bad. The front will give you a little bit of flexation.
Well, even the rear. But if you hit a 6-inch rock with
you
your
get a
left
little
rear
lift,
tire,
and then
that
back,
tire goes up 6 inches, which moves the pivot point 3 inches, which is halfway across the rear axle, which moves the rear axle up 1.5 inches in the center.
Yeah.
And it will throw a little torque on you. The front, notice it's got that walking beam front end. Well, there's a reason for that. That way, as it does this, there's no torque being applied to the frame, so that all it's doing to the blade is making it do this.
Jump.
You know, and let's say the whole geometry of the grader. The reason they look so much different than anything else, because they're designed so that any kind of deviation thrown at it has no more than 1/4 of that deviation put onto the blade. Whatever a tire does, the blade does a small fraction of, which is just the opposite of everything else. With everything else, if you make a bump, when your tire hits it, then the front end of that bucket or blade or whatever makes a much bigger bump.
Right, true.
So you've got a positive feedback system. And yeah, that's where you need a skilled operator. We had a guy named
Stephen, you're right on there. I mean, that's exactly true. If you get the right mix of gravel and everything, moisture is good, and you get compaction, it'll last. But yeah, exactly. The people all get pissed, but they want to drive way too fast for what the road is really, can be maintained at.
Yeah, Jeff. I used to sell magnesium.
Thanks for being
chloride.
here, Jeff. Good questions tonight, man.
Magnesium chloride will keep a road in good shape.
Oh, it will.
Yep.
But calcium chloride, magnesium chloride, either one. We use in Minnesota. We used both, and
they'll both work. If you're near the coast, you usually get magnesium chloride because the byproduct of evaporative salt production from seawater.
Well, we used to get it in Minnesota too. They barged it up from Louisiana or something from doing some other product.
Salt. Because what magnesium chloride is basically concentrated seawater minus the salt.
Right.
That's the next thing that's left in solution is mag chloride. But yeah, no, we had a guy named Ramiro, and this guy was really good, but he was not like you talking about this. When he was driving the dozer, his hand was doing this.
Yeah.
And he was correcting 2 to 3 times a second. And they're little minor corrections, but they were precise and accurate corrections. And his hand was always moving, but the dozer was just cruising along.
Right, never slowed down.
Yeah, and it was just amazing because it was a classic case of active compensation. But he was good. It was sad when he wrecked his motorcycle and died.
Some operators just have it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's fun to watch a good operator.
That guy Richard in Oregon that I went to his mine.
Yep.
Did you see him pushing with that excavator? Because we had a dead end with a bunch of mud, so we had to, dump it behind us and then push it out.
Yep.
That dude had 100 total hours on a mini excavator, and he could push a pretty good load and take off and leave a flat road.
Yeah.
No kidding. And I mean, a mini excavator is really tippy.
Very, very jumpy if you're.
Yeah, very touchy. And he was just a natural. Yep.
Yeah.
And some people have it, some people don't. I don't have the touch.
See, and I do, but I've grown up since a little kid growing up on a farm, you're on tractors and 4-wheelers and whatever's there, the grain
Yeah.
truck. I mean, I was driving big trucks before I was big enough to really even drive them correct, be able to run all the levers. But
reach all the levers.
yeah, reach everything, It's like, hey, I guess you're driving, you're it, And I don't know, I got that touch with equipment, and I've always liked equipment. That's part of why I wanted to go do what I'm doing. I like to dig. I can sit in the excavator and keep myself entertained digging holes.
And my brother's much better with the touch than I am. He's still not top notch, but he's a lot better than most of these guys nowadays.
Yeah,
because they don't learn any touch.
But then for me, working around an operator that's having a hard time is tough. I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut because I want to try to help them, and I don't want to be a jerk about it, but it's just like, oh God, don't do that.
Randy was saying
it's the hardest. Me, it's so hard. It hurts.
They were putting in a new ramp.
Yeah.
On this dump they were building. The dozer operator was so bad that the 6x6 trucks were almost falling over because of the side hill he built into the road inadvertently.
Oh, shit.
He couldn't even keep. It's supposed to be a flat road that goes uphill.
And it can't be sloped sideways.
And it has like 2 to 3 feet of side slope. When I say 6x, I mean those big, low articulated 6x. And he says they're just about falling over. And he's like, "Give me the damn dozer!"
Yeah, get out of that.
It's like, you're not qualified on it. You're not certified on
right,
that.
Whatever.
Like, he is?
Yeah, he is. You're right.
That shows you your certification is crap. But yeah, that's how bad it was. Can you imagine? It's hard to even imagine.
I've seen some stuff, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't watch this.
Yeah,
because it's like I'm going to want to say something, and not to be mean. It's just like, you need to figure out how to do this right here, buddy, and let me help you.
Yeah, no, it is.
And I've taught quite a few guys how to run equipment, but yeah, I've seen a couple that I'm like, you got to get him out of that excavator right now before
someone gets killed.
Well, but that, or I have a meltdown, because it's like, this is not working.
Yeah, some people just there's certain jobs some people just shouldn't try.
Well,
they're just not qualified.
A lot of times it's just lack of experience, and you gotta work with that. But I don't want to get killed either. I had guys I worked under when we were laying pipe and stuff that literally were digging right over the top of me, and I knew damn well they will never hit me.
Yeah,
I just knew it. Unless they had a total failure in something, these guys could literally run a big bucket too, a 4-yard bucket or whatever.
Yeah.
They could run that in and scratch your back for you without tipping you off your feet.
Yeah.
That's how good they were. But they had lots of hours, and they were only watching what they were doing. They weren't, looking at their phone and trying to figure out who called, And that's the shit that'll get you killed, is the guy who ain't paying attention to what he's doing.
Yeah, and I say, but there are some people who just don't have
the feel,
the knack, and that's where the supervisor needs to observe that quickly and say, okay,
let's try that person. Let's try this piece over here.
Go over there.
Let's go try it.
Hand him a number 2 Mexican drag line or something.
Yeah.
We need somebody down there cleaning that up. Absolutely. It's pretty ridiculous.
To run with some guys who really know what they're doing. It's amazing how fast they can work, though.
And how smooth.
And yeah, just everything's just.
You don't see that machine jerking. When I'm running it fast, it's jerking.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you've got a good operator, it's like,
doesn't really slow down, doesn't speed up, just nice and constant.
Yep. Okay, David.
All right. Yeah, we're probably about at the end of the day anyway here.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks everybody for being here tonight.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll pick up with a couple of new subjects, and Keith will have some results here, and
we should have a couple of videos out.
Should be another. Yeah, we'll get that video out, and
yeah, if you just, job's got to get done.
Yeah.
That's another thing young people don't have. Well, I don't want to do that. So, well, I don't want to do that.
Well, that's
Fine.
part of the job.
I don't want to pay you.
Yeah, it's part of the
Go
job.
home. Have
You
fun.
just got to do what needs to get done every day. But
Yeah.
thanks, Chris, for being here.
Yep. So anyhow,
And John, hello to John Terry there. You must have just jumped in there.
all righty.
Yeah.
Well, anyone got any questions before we call it a night? Going once? I presume not, or we probably would have seen it by now with all the just yakking we were
Everybody's
doing.
bailing, but that's good.
That's going to be funny when I tell my boss that you're the guy running that grader. That'll be hilarious.
What do you say? Who the hell did that?
No, it's just, that's just such a weird coincidence.
Does it look good?
Well, I got
Not
the-
at this point.
I
It
got
needs
the
to be
big hole
watered
in
and
front of-
compacted.
What's his name's place there? There was that great big hole in the middle of the road. I got rid of that.
Yeah. It will be
And,
okay once it's properly watered and compacted.
Compacted, right. It's
Right now it's
softer
moon dust.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
dust. Yeah, we knew that. And
Okay.
that's why we planned on going back up tomorrow and getting the fire truck up there.
Any other questions, anybody? Don't see it. Yeah, so that's just, I find that quite amusing. It's like, oh, that was Jim, huh? Front end loader or mini digger? No, he was running an old knuckle busting
Road grader.
road grader, the old mechanical ones.
Yeah, an old 1950, I suppose, 49. I don't know. It was an old one, but
Yeah,
it ran good. It actually ran really good. I was surprised.
engine's doing good. And stuff,
Yeah,
huh?
engine's strong
And the nice thing is, you know what lubricant to use. 30 weight motor oil. Doesn't matter where it is.
Yeah,
30 weight motor oil.
It's all full of oil.
That's it. It's
Mhm.
they built them that way for logistical reasons. It was great. Do you like to cut or build a road?
I
As long as you don't
enjoy
have to permit it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like doing any kind of work. So these guys had this grader and nobody knew how to run it. So I was like, well, I'll come up and run it. And they're like, you know how to run it? And I'm like, yeah.
Well, the other thing
And
that
I showed, I took off and started grading, and they're like, holy crap, you do know how to run it.
the other thing that drives me nuts when you got
Hey,
somebody
gold miner.
who's building a road or a pad or this and tears up everything around it when he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It's like
that's-
you should have your disturbed surface end cleanly and smoothly along a line,
Yeah.
preferably a nice graded bank or something like that.
That's something that
There shouldn't be a bunch of dozer tracks up on the virgin dirt where the guy was turning around up there. It's
Yeah.
like, oh my God.
Yeah,
You
you
know?
try to keep your disturbance even on a big project to as minimal as you can. And
Oh.
it's easier to fix it all later.
It looks better. It's
Yeah.
nicer. And nowadays with environmental regulations,
You have to, yeah.
it's that's the sort of thing a regulator will go out there and look at that and go, yeah, that looks good. I like that.
Well,
You got dozer tracks out there on the prairie, and they're not going to be happy at all.
no.
They're
You
not
try
going to be
to-
happy. All righty. Well, I guess we're going to call it a night here.
Yeah, thanks everybody again.
All righty. You take
Well-
care.